Welcome to the Self-Respect. My name's Jared Mello, and I'm the shepherd of Black Sheep. As you can see, I'm going live a little bit earlier today because it's New Year's Eve. And so I want to have the opportunity for people to watch the ball dropping and doing whatever they're going to do. But maybe in the new year here coming up, I will give a year of 2025 review of maybe my channel, my life, and other things that are going on in my mind. But with that, we'll wait for a few people to roll in here. I was just watching some football earlier. I was watching some Miami Hurricanes versus the Ohio State Buckeyes. I'm rooting for Miami. Mac and cheese. What's shaking? What is shaking? Jimmy, there you are. Welcome. We'll have to see if Song Bits and everyone else is in here too. We'll give them a few minutes. Yeah, occasionally I will watch some foosball. I actually like college better than the pros sometimes because it seems like the college kids are a little more enthusiastic sometimes. But I don't know. They can both be good. Montana, welcome. Danielle from hell, welcome. Happy New Year's Eve. Like I said, I wasn't sure how many people were going to be in here tonight, but we will see. And Jimmy, I am rooting for Indiana too as an underdog. They did beat Ohio State too. And Miami's doing pretty good right now as well. And Ohio State just missed a field goal right before halftime. That kicker, man, he's not doing too good for them. The Ohio State kicker, holy mackerel. Ellie, happy New Year's Eve to you, Ellie. I thought it wouldn't be right, after all the time we've all spent together, for me not to have a little bit of time with you all this evening. Any of you doing anything fun tonight? The Black Sheep Posse. Daniel's like, you've heard of the Insane Clown Posse. We got the BSP, Black Sheep Posse. The BSP. The BSP who practices RSR, radical self-respect, of course. Kat, and everyone, Sable Blonde, her name is Kat. She is already in the new year because she's across the pond. How does it feel in 2026, Kat? Tell me. Right on. I bet you there's a lot of people who are like that in Montana. And that's why I'm here. Because, the ball dropping stuff it's not for everybody. And especially depending on people's circumstance, right? It's more like a romantic relationship type thing, generally speaking. Like, who are you going to kiss when the ball drops? Now, in this video, I wish I would have discovered this video sooner. I would have went over it sooner, but as life would have it, I didn't find it until yesterday. But this video is pretty interesting. Now, I can't say that what this guy is going to say here, his sources are definitely correct, right? I can't say that. So since I'm not going to say that the schizophrenia diagnosis is definitely true because it's just a source, I will say the same about this video coming up. I don't know, but we're going to act as if it's true for the sake of the video. How about that? And if it's true, we're going to learn a lot about Nick Reiner's character, period. And there's a lot of unflattering things in this video, which honestly add up to me. Karen, welcome. What did you all think of the Erica Kirk video yesterday? Hopefully I wasn't too political about it. I mean, some people probably would get a little turned off with anything political, but that wasn't really a political video. It was more like a personality and behavior breakdown video. Ellie's drinking coffee because I am lazy now. So I thought that was pretty cool, though, that I like doing the breakdowns, right? Because in terms of the political world, I don't agree with everyone 100%. And I don't disagree with anyone 100% either for the very most part. So I'll listen to everybody, and there's some things I'll agree with and some things I won't agree with. That's kind of how I play it. Now, to be a creator in the political space, though, you kind of have to be on one team or the other for the very most part, or people just get too angry at you. They can't deal with the disagreements. That's why I probably wouldn't do well in that space. Eagles, that's till when? Saturday or Sunday? Yeah, I mean, the politics bring out some interesting cats, you know? I think Nick had a personality disorder as a child. I would not be surprised one bit. And as you will see here, Joanna, a lot of the things we're going to go over point to that. Because what else would it be? Let's see here. Yes. All right. Let's hop right into this here. Actually, there we go.
After Rob Reiner's 28-year-old daughter, Romy, discovered him and her mother both killed brutally with their throats slashed, she called 911 and told police that her brother should be considered a suspect and was violent. How would she know that? Because he made threats against her. Hello, my friend. It is Perez, the queen of all media, the original influencer, and we are putting the pieces together. What was going on in the months, days, weeks, hours leading up to the brutal, savage, heartless murder of Rob Reiner and Michelle Reiner, and the kind of person that their son is. 32-year-old Nick Reiner. Evil, soulless, empty, and I think resentful of his family. And it is such a blessing that that young woman was not home when he was there. A source confirms to the Daily Mail, quote, Nick had been living in their guest house, the same one he destroyed more than once, but it had been like a revolving door all his adult life. He would do meth and not sleep for days and then have outbursts, breaking things, punching walls. He was a ticking time bomb. His drug use was getting worse and his parents wanted him out. AA and NA are supposed to be anonymous, but unfortunately, somebody who knew Nick from that is blabbing. And that's why I do think this Daily Mail report is credible.
And that is not what you're supposed to do at AA and NA. You are not supposed to blab what you hear at a meeting. So that's kind of a poor character thing to do himself or herself there. They say what is shared here stays here. Here. But this person here is not adhering to that. So that's a strike in my book. But we will see what they have to say, and then we'll make more of an analysis from there.
Because a lot of people are like canaries. They will start singing when there's money. And especially if this person is off the wagon and they're going to use this money for substances or alcohol. This insider claims that Nick, quote, used to brag how he could get away with anything and took money from his parents for rhymes with hugs and prostitutes, professional lovers. He would talk about this stuff in meetings, but then.
So what does that sound like? Bragging that he can do those kinds of things. That sounds like a little bit of a character disorder issue there. Bragging about it, like, where's the self-awareness there? It just seems to be missing.
Stopped going because he said it was too cultish. He laughed about destroying his parents' guest house more than once. He was so nonchalant about it. He kept saying he hadn't touched, the H word, heroin, and that he could handle his weed, but that turned into meth and staying up for days and not eating. He really had no control. He busted his hands when he punched the bathroom wall and refused to get help. He would fight with his parents because they would give him the ultimatum: take medication and stop using or move out. When he started threatening his sister for confronting him, that's when all hell broke loose. His parents threatened to call authorities multiple times, but in the end...
So he threatened his sister. That's pretty bad. And it would make sense that his sister was scared of him as well, especially if he was making threats against her. I mean, none of this sounds good. I mean, and this doesn't sound just like schizophrenia to me, as they would like you to believe. It doesn't seem that way. These things seem more character disorder to me, personality disorder to me, whether it's vulnerable narcissism or psychopathy or whatever it is. It gives me that vibe, much more so than a schizophrenia vibe. No, that's not a diagnosis. It's just an opinion, but that's what it seems like.
Didn't. During a podcast interview in 2018, Nick, as I previously shared with you all, recounted a story about how he destroyed the guest house, and the host asked him why he did that. If the outburst was a way to relieve pent-up anger. And Nick Reiner responded, "No, you're crazy. No logic." No logic?
So someone says, Eval says, weed is not a gateway drug. That is a myth. FYI, drugs can come in many different forms. I mean, for many people who move on to harder drugs, they do start with weed. I mean, that's what I did. And I moved on to harder drugs. Does that mean it's a gateway drug? Not for everyone, but for the people who are already prone to be addicts or have already a mental illness, it will absolutely serve as a gateway drug for many people. Does that mean it's a gateway drug for everyone? No, but it does start the process for many. That and drinking. I mean, weed's a drug. Caffeine's a drug too, for that matter. I mean, I smoked weed really before I drank alcohol because it was easier for me to get that because I just didn't know people who were over 21 who would do it for me. Now, for me now, I would rather drink than smoke weed now, but I do neither, really. I don't like weed at all anymore. I'm undiagnosed on the spectrum, like I said, and for me, it gives me panic attacks. It gives me extreme hypervigilance. It gives me a very painful mirror into my life. I act the way that some people say they act when they take ayahuasca. It's like a very painful experience to me, and I see all the ways in life I can be doing better. There's some ways that can be helpful, but I certainly wouldn't say it's a pleasant experience at all. Now, like I said, will weed be a gateway drug for everyone? No. If people aren't prone to addiction or they're not covering up some sort of mental illness, yeah, people can smoke and drink like a normal person, and then never turns into more. But other people, they just can't do that. And then it turns into much more. It just depends on the person.
No reason for that? That's the real crazy. And as I also previously shared, Nick had struggled with substance abuse since he was a young teenager, just 14 years old.
And one more thing. In a previous video, I was talking about the personality disorders. Schizotypal, it's pronounced, not schizotypal. And again, I think I've heard so many people pronounce it wrong that I just thought that's what it was. But it's schizotypal.
In fact, he previously said in an interview that he lost his virginity at 14 when he stole money from his parents to hire a professional lover. At 14 years old. He explained, quote, I was just looking at the different Craigslist profiles, and this one was just an booty shot. That's the only thing that was her profile picture, and it had a number. I called her, and some kid that I met at outpatient rehab told me you could do this. That's how I knew how to do it. He had already been to rehab by 14.
I mean, a part of that also is his parents just have the resources to send him there. It wasn't a big thing, for one. They were probably on top of it and said, uh-oh, he's on drugs or something. Let's get him to rehab. Also to note, he said on the Dopey podcast, he didn't even go to high school. He didn't go to high school, and he didn't graduate from high school. And that's a big thing right there, too. I mean, who doesn't go to high school? Like, something's pretty weird about that, in my opinion. And I mean, I was watching this show the other day about Macaulay Culkin, and that's one thing he really wanted to do because he was such a child star that by the time he was a teenager, he wanted to have a normal life. And so he wanted to go to high school and do things that kids his age would normally do. But Nick apparently didn't want to go to school. Maybe he was a little bit of a social outcast or whatever. For whatever reason, apparently he didn't go. But I don't know what his parents were thinking with that. Like, who lets their kids not go to school? And I guess if you're going to 18 rehabs, you're doing that instead of going to school, I guess. I mean, I don't know.
Ay, ay, ay. It does make me wonder if his life would have, not even wonder, I know his life would have been so different had substances not been introduced at such a young age. Nick chatted more about the incident in this podcast, telling the host about the professional lover, quote, I think I was watching Tom and Jerry or something, and I went over to my computer and got this woman's number. I called her up when I was about 14 or something, and her going rate was about $200. This is the part of the story that I don't usually tell, but I'll tell it anyways. I got $200 from my parents. Obviously, he was not forthcoming with his mom and dad about what he needed the money for. I didn't say, hey, look, I'm going to be with a S worker tonight. Do you think you have an extra $200? He just asked for the money. Once he had his hands on the cash, he called this S worker to come to the family home.
Apparently, this guy's not used to addicts' behavior because I hear that and I'm like, and I've heard plenty of people do that kind of thing.
It was like 1 a.m. She comes over. I didn't know how it worked, so I tried to kiss her. She didn't want that, explains Nick. He adds that she wasn't particularly a good-looking chick, but he committed to the pursuit nonetheless. Quote, I didn't care because I was young and I was like, this is awesome. I lasted 15 seconds. I kind of felt like crap, but I was like, that's awesome. Then I realized I had more money on me and I called her back. She came for a second time. I never asked her name and I never really got into any specifics of anything. But somewhere along the way, when I used to tell this, someone dubbed her as Cherry Red. So that's what I go by as Cherry Red. I ate a enhanced brownie and I was extremely blazed, but I still would have done it if I was sober. The second time, I lasted 30 seconds. Nick Reiner went to rehab at least 18 times.
And someone said in the comments earlier, this guy looks like William H. Macy's cousin, except maybe like I don't know what kind of version, but you see the resemblance a little bit, like a wild version of William H. Macy.
18 times. And his dad thought that his son was finally doing better. In fact, in an interview 3 months ago, Rob Reiner said the following: "I was never ever too busy for Nick." The elder Reiner told NPR while promoting the sequel to This Is Spinal Tap in September. "I mean, if anything, I was the other way, you know. I was more hands-on and trying to do whatever I thought I could do to help. I'm sure I made mistakes, and you know, I've talked about that with him since." Rob added that he believed Nick was doing well in this September interview from this year. "He's been great. Hasn't been doing drugs for over 6 years.
And so he's saying September interview of this year. I'm presuming he means the year 2025. So Rob thinks that Nick hasn't been using any drugs for 6 years. Do we think that's true? I would tend not to believe that. Is it possible? It's possible. But I also think it's possible that he was just hiding it from his dad. So, but either way, you can say, all right, maybe he was clean for 6 years, but between September and now, things must have gone off the rails somehow, some way, especially if he was in some sort of rehab. And again, we don't know the reason why he went to the rehab, whether it was drugs or just mental health related. We don't know yet.
A really good place. And maybe there was some truth to that. In fact, a friend of Rob Reiner's just spoke today to the New York Post to talk about staying at the family home back in November of this year.
And to circle back here too, so one of the reasons Nick didn't like AA and NA was, oh, it's too much of a cult. And here's the thing about that. Yeah, I would say it might have some cult-like elements, but of all the cult-like element things out there, it's one of the more positive ones. And I do see it saves a lot of people's lives. And in retrospect, if you compare and contrast it to the evils of hardcore drug abuse or severe alcoholism, okay, dealing with a little bit of a cult-like place is a big step in the right direction in comparison. But what happens to a lot of personality disordered people is those 12-step fellowships, they require too much humility for them. They don't like the anonymous part. They don't like getting honest. They don't like being vulnerable. And so a lot of them just don't like it. They're not able to do the program. And then some people would say, oh, see, that means the programs don't work. And it's like, well, you can't force someone to do the program. Right? You can't force someone to comply with the suggestions. But that being said, if they ever were to try, there are actually studies now that show 12-step programs can actually help narcissistic people. And some people might not like even hearing that, but I can see why that would work. What you do in a 12-step program is like the antidote to narcissism. It is getting honest, having humility, and it's an anonymous program. It's harder to get narcissistic supply in an anonymous program. Now, you still get some, right? When you speak for your anniversaries, you can get a form of supply from that. Sure, it's not perfect, but if they work it and try, it might be able to help them. And if you want to see those kinds of people get help, I mean, why not? Why not, right? Why? They might as well try. I mean, many will not, as Nick has proven here, but still.
Cinematographer Barry Markowitz is a longtime friend and collaborator of Rob Reiner's and does not live in Los Angeles, but He was heading to LA for the premiere of a new project that he was working on, and Rob invited Barry to stay at his house. Quote, they would say, you're staying here. You're not going to no hotel. There's no fridge, good toilet paper, no family. The cinematographer tells the New York Post. Markowitz joined Rob and Michelle, his wife, and their kids, Nick and Romy, as they went about their days, quote, business as usual. Rob's other son, Jake, was busy elsewhere with work. Barry explains, quote, Romy, her 28-year-old daughter, was in and out of the house, and at dinner she comes over and we all BS together. We would scream at the TV. We watched a movie and a basketball game, played with the dogs, family time, one big love fest. And as for Nick, Barry says, quote, remember, this is back in November. He looked great. He was sitting and talking with the family. They eat dinner together, old school, and a lot of love, always a lot of love. The cinematographer said that Nick seemed to be on the upswing, adding that he knows Nick since he was a teenager.
And that's an interesting thing there too, right? He was on the upswing. And it reminds me of the people that have wanted to end their own life. Reportedly, what happens is sometimes right before they actually complete the act, it seems like they're on the upswing. It seems like they're doing better. But what has really happened is they are more at peace and feel relief that they know they've made the decision and they're going to follow through with it. So again, that's where it can be tricky, right? It can look like it's going well from the outside, but you don't always know what's going on the inside, especially when there's mental health, addiction, and personality disorders involved. And again, I tend to think he's more undiagnosed on the spectrum than he is schizophrenic. That's what it looks like to me. That's not a diagnosis either, but that's the vibe I get. And you can be on the spectrum and you can have a personality disorder too. It's not mutually exclusive.
Markowitz tells the Post that during this visit, Nick would go out and play tennis or shoot hoops. He was also around and present during dinner time. Quote, he helped out, he took out the garbage, he watched TV, he washed dishes, he'd bring me something to drink. He was just normal in that sense. Is it just the substances? It has to be more than that.
Yes, I think it's not just the substances. I think personality disorder, character disorder, maybe undiagnosed on the spectrum. And even if it's just schizophrenia, using substances is not going to help your schizophrenia in any way. Heroin, coke, meth, crack, weed, all of those are terrible for schizophrenia. And if you truly know you have schizophrenia, you can't be doing that. You have to take responsibility for your mental health. Yeah, no one chooses to have a mental health issue, right? I think that's another important thing to go over. No one chooses it, but it's given to us through our genes, through can be hereditary, in my opinion. Like, I don't think anyone chooses to be on the spectrum. No one chooses to be schizophrenic. No one chooses to be bipolar. But no one chooses the hand they've been dealt in life. Nobody. Nobody chooses their parents. Nobody chooses their face. Nobody chooses how tall they are or how attractive they are. But we are responsible for how we play that hand, whatever it is. And you better believe some hands are much better than other hands. Some people get dealt pocket aces, and then other people get dealt 7-2. But here's the thing. Some people play their 7-2 better than some people who have been dealt pocket aces in the game of life.
This has to be something that has been leading to this, building up. Markowitz noted that he didn't notice anything strange with family dynamics. They were busy working and doing stuff, he said of the Reiners. The help was there.
So let me address this here real quick. It's sad how the parents have to be responsible for this guy's behavior. Now, the parents are not responsible. Like, Nick is the one responsible for his behavior, period. What I've said about Rob and his wife would be, I think in some cases they might have enabled it, or they didn't follow through with enough consequences. And in some of this video you're about to hear, they talk about them being tougher in the beginning, but it sounds like they let their foot off the gas on that a little bit because they thought Nick's the expert on himself. These licensed professionals are wrong. But I don't think that was the right thing to do. And I do know there's a lot of people saying to me, especially on Facebook, tough love's the wrong way to go. You got to be more sensitive and caring. And I would say that's not what you need when there's a personality disorder and addiction. A lot of times you need more of the consequences, and people associate consequences with being brutal or having no empathy. And that's not what it means, though. You're doing these things out of love. You're not doing it to like be hard on them for no reason, because sometimes the consequences and boundaries will actually help them to improve. But some people just don't see it that way.
The secretaries were there, in and out of the house, business as usual. Markowitz described his 5-night stay with the Reiners as being a blast. Quote, I think what's puzzling the most, the 360, is that there was so much love that it doesn't jive. I'm not here to judge anyone. LOVE is the only thing I saw. And I don't think it was fake. They had a real bond.
And so this is a guy that was staying with them all, someone who wasn't a family member, and he said it was all love, and it looked like a real bond. I don't know, because we went over those interviews between when Rob and Nick were being interviewed for Being Charlie. That didn't look like they were super close there to me. It looked like they were awkward. And again, maybe things improved later on, maybe, or had the appearance of improving. Or maybe some people just aren't good at picking up on things. But because clearly it must not have been going that well.
It's just a sickness, the cinematographer friend says of Nick. That's my verdict. Markowitz tells the Post that Rob and Michelle never, ever, ever gave up on Nick during his very public, decades-long struggle with substance abuse. Quote, they gave him everything. They tried a million things with him, not giving him money, but sending him to the top of the line places. Rob never gave up. He tried everything. If you knew Rob, he was just a bundle of love.
And so after this video is the reports that came out of $10,000 a month allowance. Now, some people had said he only got that money if he was behaving. But even so, I mean, okay, you're behaving for a while. Maybe you stack up $10,000 and then you go act out, and you got a nice little nest egg to go act out on.
As for Michelle, his wife, Markowitz described her as a balabusta, using the Yiddish word for an exceptionally skilled homemaker. She was the kingpin and she was the strength. Markowitz also denied that there was any father-son tension on the set of the movie that Rob directed and his son wrote. Markowitz was the cinematographer of that movie, Being Charlie. Quote, I cannot remember no tension. We were just having a decent time, all of us, one big family, and there was no fights, he claims.
And that seems to be in direct contradiction to what other people said on the Being Charlie set. They said it seems like they were at each other's necks, other people said. So now you're getting contradicting stories here. Now, someone mentioned the 2000 roast of Rob Reiner in the chat. I don't even think I can play that because it's Comedy Central and it's copyrighted. But I mean, really, what people are saying is what Billy Crystal said and what Al Franken said. Now, what Al Franken said, people are mischaracterizing what Al Franken even said if you listen to it. People are saying that Al Franken is saying Rob used to invite his friends over to essay Nick. That is not what he was saying. What he was saying was Rob's dad did that to Rob. Everyone fails to mention that part. It's a little bit different. And Billy Crystal, he did make a creepy joke about luring children into vans. And especially through the 2025 lens, like that's out of control, right? Like, oh my God, you said what about him because he likes children that much? Now, again, there's two different ways to see it. They're just busting balls through a 2000 lens, or the uncharitable way to see it would be, oh, there's more to it than meets the eye. Now, which one is it? I mean, think about it like this. Like, if there really was more to it than meets the eye, like how stupid is Billy Crystal to do that at that point to his so-and-so friend? I mean, I bet you now he probably regrets that now, especially considering how many people have ran with it.
Markowitz went on to tell the Post that Rob and Michelle had no reason to think that Nick would ever hurt them. Rob never had fears for his safety, says his friends. I'm not in his head, but we talked. Nick wasn't a violent type. He obviously did not know Nick that well. He adds, I slept in the same house as Nick. There was never a thought, I believe, in Rob's head that Nick was a danger. If he would have thought his life was in peril at any point, he would have handled the situation. Okay, this is starting to seem like spin. As I mentioned earlier today, Nick has already retained somehow a very powerful lawyer, Alan Jackson, who helped get Karen Reed off the hook earlier this year. In fact, Alan was spotted by the media today outside of the Reiner family home in Brentwood. What was he doing there? Why should the family even talk to Nick's lawyer? This friend of Reiner's continues saying, when somebody is mentally disturbed, you don't need a reason. There's no rhyme or reason. Mental illness, that's the reason. Markowitz worked on 3 films with Rob and viewed him like a brother, and he is totally broken after losing his friend.
And here's the other thing. There's debate in the psychology community about whether personality disorders should be considered a mental illness. Now, Dr. Mark Eatonson, who I've interviewed, and I invited him on to speak with Dr. Peter Salerno and he would say narcissism and other personality disorders are a mental illness. I don't believe that Dr. Salerno believes that, though. Don't quote me on that, but I think he's made videos about mental illness versus personality disorders, and I don't think he would consider them one. But I'll have to go back and check to be sure.
And he also considered Michelle a friend too. I can't believe they're not here. I'm looking at the iPad. Everything is Rob Reiner. I started crying. I want to call him up and say, hey, buddy. Rob was like my family. 4 or 5 days later, I'm here in this effing nightmare. And another friend of Rob and Michelle Reiner's is also speaking out, Michelle Obama, saying that she...
And Crazy says it's semantics whether a personality disorder is mental illness. And I would say yes, it doesn't really matter. Personality disorders are a problem regardless of how you label them. Doesn't really matter. The only way it might really matter is for insurance purposes. But outside of that, no. Like, it is what it is. It doesn't change what anyone has to do. It doesn't really change how anyone like would handle it for themselves either. So I agree, crazy.
Had plans with them on the day they died, were murdered. Michelle, appearing on Kimmel last night, said, "Oh my God, Barack and I have known them for many, many years, and we were supposed to see them that night, and we got the news." Obama's appearance on Kimmel was after Donald Trump had shared his very heartless and cruel words about Rob Reiner's passing. She said, "Unlike some people, her late friends were decent and courageous. They are not deranged or crazed. What they have always been are passionate people. In a time when not a lot of courage is going on, they were the kind of people to put their actions behind what they cared about. And they cared about their family, they cared about this country, and they cared about fairness and equity. And that is the truth. I do know them." Another person who knew Nick is speaking out, Rob and Michelle's yoga instructor. And because they were very wealthy, the kind of yoga instructor who would go to the family home to do private lessons. Alana Zabel says that she was their yoga instructor for years when Nick was younger, and that Nick allegedly began being a struggle for his parents at an early age. According to the yoga instructor, their son interrupted pretty much all of their yoga sessions at their Brentwood home. She claims the disruptions lasted 20 minutes or so, adding that it was often intense and involved a lot of screaming.
So what does that sound like? Behavioral issues at the least, right? And maybe Nick didn't like his parents not maybe giving him the attention and having them be distracted by the yoga person. But whatever it is, kind of sounds like he was being a brat, and entitled. And this is way back when they were younger. And as HG Tutor would say, you have to take a look at the whole picture here to really figure it out. And this is going back into the past. And so, not good. Not good. Another clue that kind of points to maybe either some sort of character, personality disorder issue, or some sort of like oppositional defiance thing or something. Like, it's not good.
Eventually, they asked Michelle to help their son to hopefully calm his nervous system with yoga. She agreed, saying that Nick was this little boy with behavioral issues. He allegedly was always upsetting everyone, but was trying to figure it out. Boys are wild in general, not just Nicky. And so I would always focus on the physicality. Let me teach him how to do a handstand. Let me teach him how to do crow so he can feel this sense of accomplishment in his body. I really focused our sessions on trying to exhaust him so that I could get to that place of connection and mindfulness. However, Alana said that she rarely got there because he was just inexhaustible. She remembered Nick was unusually energetic and even wondered if he had some kind of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, since kids and teens with ADHD are more likely to abuse substances. The yoga instructor added, that kind of energy requires a lot of disarming.
And I wonder if they gave him a diagnosis back then of ADD or ADHD, and then maybe he got a prescription of like Adderall or Vyvanse or Ritalin. We don't know that, right? I'm just speculating that maybe that might have happened. We don't know that though. But all that energetic, wound up stuff, that is kind of like what they would say is the ADHD type thing. But they also say that stimulant medication, especially as a young kid, it disrupts the play circuit in the brain. And so, and I honestly, this is what I would say. If some guy like really thinks their child has ADHD, I'd say you try like giving them some tea or coffee first, honestly, before you give them some heavy duty stimulant medication. If it's like, if you really think it's bad, it's like, and think about that for a second. Some people would be more likely to give their child Adderall than they would a cup of coffee, because they would say, "Oh my goodness, give a cup of coffee to a kid? Oh, but here's an Adderall." Like, think about that for a minute. That's absurd.
I know a lot of kids who were of that intensity who turned out to be well adjusted adults. The yoga instructor noted that there are many variables to consider with a child's behavior, including genetic and environmental components. There's also the fact that the Reiners live in Hollywood. I have witnessed the children of Hollywood personalities have a really difficult time because they're living in a fantasy world. The parents are prioritizing many things, including them, but there's often a perception of negligence.
And here's the other thing before I get into this negligence part. So if his behavior looked like ADHD and he said, "Oh, people who have ADHD, they're more likely to use drugs." Sure, very true. But people with ADHD are not the only people who are more likely to use drugs. People that are undiagnosed on the spectrum that maybe have level 1 are likely to use. People that have severe anxiety, if you're a guy, you're more likely to use alcohol or drugs to self-medicate than a woman would be. Although women can do it too, of course, but men are just more likely to self-medicate. If you have bipolar, you're more likely to use. If you, what else is out there? And probably if personality disorder, you're more likely to use as well. But here's the thing. So maybe they thought he had ADHD and then you give him Adderall, but then it turns out actually you're schizophrenic. And now you're giving the developmental brain Adderall when in reality it's schizophrenia. And stimulants like that can make schizophrenia worse. So that wouldn't be very good. So again, it's so complicated, especially when things can be comorbid with one another. It's really tough. It's really tough to figure it out. And that's one of the reasons I think that 12-step fellowships can be good, because it can at least help people to get stabilized so that you can really figure out what really is it. Like you've put down the substances so you can be more likely to figure out what's really going on. But it's really hard to even get to that point. So I'm not saying it's easy to do that, but it's still difficult. But if you can do it, then you're more likely to be able to figure it out.
And living in a major city where substances are so accessible, you can use the name of someone and it can lead kids down the wrong road if they don't have the right guidance. But don't get it twisted. The yoga instructor insists that Rob and Michelle did absolutely everything they could to help Nick, a sentiment we have heard repeatedly from those who knew the Reiners. Their yoga instructor says the parents handled his problems head on despite being passionate people with very demanding lives. Alana feels that ultimately Nick chose a negative perception of his circumstances and took on a personal neglect, claiming he had an egocentric mindset. Quote, "I really think that he took on a lot of things that he didn't need to." Ultimately, in light of this tragedy, Alana's advice to parents is to make sure that you are present and grounded and giving your children proper attention.
I don't think you can accuse Rob and Michelle Reiner of not caring enough. I think they did really try, and I think they did try to do everything they could. There's just maybe a couple of times where they maybe didn't understand addiction and mental health as well as they could have, perhaps, and made a couple of decisions that weren't the best. But that doesn't make it their fault. That doesn't mean it's their fault. It's always Nick's fault that this has happened. Like, he can't blame these other things, in my opinion. You can't do that. It's him. He's the one responsible. And the thing is about with ADHD meds, I do see them work for some people, but also I wonder sometimes if, like the same thing with SSRIs, where it just masks an issue. And maybe for some people, it's masking an issue more so than really helping an issue. But again, it depends on each individual person. Each person has to find out what works for them. There won't be a one size fits all treatment for any of these things, I don't think. And in fact, maybe the only time that's not true, like if someone has the severe bipolar 1, most of them are going to be helped by some sort of meds in that case. You can try to do it naturally, but naturally might not be enough. You might need some sort of mood stabilizer.
It's a miracle I turned out relatively okay because my mom gave me no attention. Maybe that's why I turned out the way I did. Sorry, I needed that moment of levity. Contrary to what the cinematographer said, a stuntman who worked on the Being Charlie movie,
mental illness does not always come before addiction. Addiction can happen regardless of whether there's mental illness or not.
Claims that he did see tension between father and son. And I'm inclined to believe the stuntman, not the friend who stayed at Rob's house last month, whom maybe is working with the new lawyer. Only because I remember yesterday watching an interview where Rob Reiner himself said that he got into some disagreements with his son making this movie, Being Charlie. However, he added that the experience did bring them closer together. Stunt performer Eric Audet says there was a ton of tension between father and son, making it really awkward for everyone else. Eric recalled arriving to set once and discovering that the two were in the middle of an argument in front of the entire cast and crew. Quote, they're just going off on each other. You could tell Nick was spoiled and Rob was just sick of his. Eric recalled the tension in the room, adding, I just assumed whether this is correct or not, this kid must be pushing all his buttons. Rob can't do anything right. He's a Nepo baby, a spoiled kid to the T. Obviously, he loved his son because he's doing this movie for his son, and still, his son was unappreciative. I picked up on all that hostility from just one day on set. Oh.
So this is the other side of it, right? This is the person that's saying that there's all sorts of tension on that set, and Nick seemed unappreciative. What does that sound like? Someone doesn't have gratitude, or who's maybe entitled? And granted, here's the thing with mental illness as well. It makes it much more difficult to have a good attitude as well, right? And that's another thing that makes it more difficult to parse out which one it is. Is it something that's more like schizoaffective or schizotypal or schizophrenia or whatever it is, right? If you have, and even if it's just depression, that's going to influence your attitude. It's going to influence your mindset. And it's going to be hard to have gratitude. And so all of these things, it's tricky. It's certainly tricky, where I think if you can get someone to the place where they can at least stop the hardcore drug abuse, you got a chance. You got a chance to kind of figure things out, because you can work on your attitude, your mindset, your mind, body, spirit. And if you do that, you're going to put yourself in the most likely position to succeed if you can do that.
He only worked on the movie just one day. All right, maybe the longtime friend and frequent collaborator knows more. Speaking of longtime friends and collaborators, Mandy Patinkin, whom many of us know not just from Broadway, but for his iconic role in The Princess Bride.
Now, Mandy Patinkin, I think his name is, my favorite role of his was in Criminal Minds. he was Gideon in Criminal Minds. And he was only in, I think, the first 2 seasons of Criminal Minds, but they were the best 2 seasons by far, because he had an awesome character, and he just brought a wisdom and a presence to the table there that the rest of the cast didn't have as much, in my opinion. And to me, the show took a dive after he left. It was still good. It just wasn't as good as when he was there as part of the behavioral analysis unit, the FBI BAU.
Says of that film's director, how do we process this unthinkable tragedy? Loss after loss after loss. What is happening to our world? What is happening to our human race? I can't breathe, but I'm breathing. I'm howling at the gods every moment. Then I talk to a friend or myself and quiet down, and I realize the gods are not to blame. The tsunami of tragedy is the responsibility of human beings. Looking back on The Princess Bride, Mandy says, when we were filming the scene in The Princess Bride where Inigo kills the six-fingered man and says, I want my father back, you SOB. Take after take after take, Rob kept asking me to do less, do less, do less. In my sleepless nights, I realized he wanted less anger from me to allow my broken heart to be felt. In the past, Patinkin revealed that his own father passed away just a few years before filming The Princess Bride, so that heartbreak he was feeling was very real. This is what Rob helped him lock in on during filming, and it's stuck with Patinkin ever since. The Criminal Minds star says that he's using his friend's memory to remind himself to keep fighting. Now I'm hearing his voice tell us all to do more, do more, do more to repair the human soul, to repair our hearts, to repair our country, to repair our world, to never give up, to keep fighting, to keep living for every soul taken from this earth that no longer has the life and breath to raise their voices for a better world. We must raise our voices for them. Follow Rob's example. Let Rob Reiner's actions guide you. I don't believe we ever recover from such cumulative loss, but I am certain it teaches us to live with a greater purpose, to cherish every moment that we are alive, to be.
So I'm the one who has said that I'm not diagnosing Nick Reiner with a personality disorder, but I do see some what I would consider vulnerable narcissism traits within him. And I see that in his entitlement, his behavioral issues, his sense of grandiosity, his bragging about like not such good things. And you could even make an argument for some antisocial traits in there too. But again, that's not me diagnosing him. It just seems like he's got some of that stuff going on. And that stuff can be going on with undiagnosed autism and with schizophrenia, or with one of the cluster A personality disorders, schizotypal or schizoaffective.
Of service to every aspect of our existence, to never give up. When we're feeling lost, say to ourselves, what would Rob do? And then do it. Do it for Rob. Do it for all of us. Now, a different family friend is also speaking to the media, but they are choosing to remain anonymous. They reveal to the Daily Mail that there was some sort of fight on Thanksgiving weekend. This family friend claims to have known Rob for over 50 years. Quote, I don't know if it was Friday or Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend, but Michelle was really bothered by this alleged fight. She said that it was really bad between Rob and Nick, and it was the same around and round that they always had. They were constantly butting heads. Rob was friends with everyone and the nicest guy in the room, says his longtime friend.
And I would wonder, to be a fly on the wall, what were those arguments even about? What were they talking about? Was like Rob trying to encourage Nick to do something with his life? Or were they having arguments about Nick's drug abuse? What were those arguments about? I do think that matters. And it would matter to know what they were at each other's throats for. I think that would matter too. I mean, the only people that know that answer are the people that saw it. But Romy and her brother's name's Jake, I believe. So Jake and Romy, they would know probably what those arguments were about. And they would be very telling, if you ask me.
He wore his heart on his sleeve, along with Michelle, so it pained them immensely that the wonderful life they had was with its cracks. And those cracks were from Nick and his substance abuse and mental illness issues. That said, the parents maintained a positive outlook when navigating their son's challenges. You'd never know it, says the friend, as they dealt with it with as much grace as possible and never burdened their friends with it, just occasionally saying they were looking to get him help. They would think of anything they could do to help Nick, and once things seemed to be working, something would change and they would be at square one all over again. It was a revolving circle that they couldn't get out of. Another longtime family friend, Jane Fonda, shares, Rob and Michelle were wonderful, caring, smart, funny, generous people, always coming up with ideas for how to make the world better, kinder. They had been helping me launch the committee for the First Amendment. I saw them the night before last, the night before they died, looking healthy and happy. I am reeling with grief, stunned. And now we hear again directly from Nick Reiner. In an interview, he once explained how fame influenced him into a rebellious, angry space. But he said that he still felt lucky to have his parents. In the Two Chairs and a Microphone podcast.
Before he gets into that, I mean, here's the thing. If someone recognizes they're mentally ill, which I would imagine Nick had to have at a point, then it becomes your responsibility to do what's best for your mental health. And yeah, people will self-medicate mental health issues all the time with drugs, but that's not the best way to go at all. I mean, clearly. But severe drugs, heroin, meth, crack, coke, those things are just not sustainable. And there comes a point when you just have to take the ownership and you have to kind of grow up, for lack of a better word. And you have to figure out, like, what's going on? How do I take care of my mental health? If it's schizophrenia, what do I have to do? If I'm on the spectrum, what do I have to do? Is it one of the cluster A personality disorders? What do I have to do? Is it cluster B, cluster C? Whatever it is, it just becomes your responsibility to handle it. Now, again, that doesn't make it easy. That doesn't mean it's going to be a walk in the park. It's probably going to be one of the hardest things you ever have to do. But if you want to have a semblance of a happy and productive life, it's what you got to do. I mean, how many happy heroin addicts do you see? How many happy meth heads do you see? You probably don't, right? Because they're incongruent with one another.
Host Paul Mercurio brought up the movie Being Charlie, which we've discussed, the semi-autobiographical film about the young man with substance abuse struggles and butting heads with his family. So Nick discusses the movie and how he felt lucky to have a dad and mom who cared about him so much. I think I'm lucky in the sense that I have parents that care about me. Because of that, when I would go out and do things like substances and stuff like that, I'd feel a tremendous amount of guilt. Something tells me he doesn't feel any guilt about what he did now. He is an empty zombie now. I'd think, he added, they're thinking about me right now. They want me to do good. Some people don't have parents that have any interest in them, said Nick Reiner. What Nick shared really touched Rob. In fact, Rob Reiner himself said, quote, what he just said really got me, which is that deep down he trusted that we loved him and that we were there for him. I think that's where we made the mistake. We didn't trust that he had that in him. Well, sadly, we know now what he had in him.
Rewind that for them.
In fact, Rob Reiner himself said, quote, what he just said really got me, which is that deep down he trusted that we loved him and that we were there for him. I think that's where we made the mistake. We didn't trust that he had that in him. Well, sadly, we know now what he had in him. Murder.
I guess they're referring to love. Is that what they're referring to there? I don't really get the implication. But I mean, here's the thing. I think, and this is where there's conflicting schools of thought on addiction recovery and mental health recovery. Like, I think it is so important to try to aim towards the right attitude. And then some people will say, no, it's just not how it works. It's impossible. But I'm someone who's been through all of this. I've been through undiagnosed autism. And yeah, I almost killed myself because of it via drugs and whatever. I've been through addiction. I've been through severe anxiety and severe depression where I've wanted to end my own life. And I'm telling you, from that perspective, the attitude is so important. And sure, when you're in a bad spot, it is the most difficult to have a good attitude. It's the most difficult to do the things that are best for you. But you got to try. And that's what I think AA and NA does for people, right? It calls people on that. And this is why also sometimes the mental health professionals don't always like AA and NA. But I think for me, it really helped because they don't allow that, oh, just not going to happen, not going to work. It's like, no, they lovingly support and encourage you to do better. And I think there's this thing in a lot of mental health treatment and addiction treatment where it's like they're just so afraid to encourage and try to guide them in the right direction. I just don't think that helps at all. And people will get mad at me for that all the time. And they think, oh, Jared, you don't understand. You don't this, you don't that. Your experience isn't everyone's experience. And true to a point, but I would have to see each individual person. And if I were to talk to Nick, I bet you what you would find is a lot of character issues in there. Someone who is acting like a jerk, someone who he needs a spiritual component, if you ask me. To me, it's pretty clear he was missing that. And that's also what AA and NA does for people. It gives you some sort of spiritual connection. And that's the part the mental health world doesn't like talking about very much. And the official addiction recovery world, they won't talk about it as much. But notice a lot of rehabs, they tell you to go to AA and NA. And that piece is so important. And yet, sometimes people just neglect it. And then when you neglect it, a lot of them don't get as good results. So there's a lot of stuff going into it, but I think getting on that track is so important.
In the same interview, Nick shared how growing up in a famous family led him down a rebellious, angry, substance abuse addicted path. Quote, I don't think this is any different than most people going through their teenage years, but I think that I had no identity and I had no passions. I had a famous dad and a famous grandpa, and that fame sort of informs who you are. So I wanted to etch out my own identity with a more rebellious, angry, drug addicted sort of persona.
And this sounds like a choice to me. Like this was his choice to say, I kind of want to be a bad boy, like a drug addict, a druggy persona. That seems like a choice at that point. And when you're making these choices, you can't be surprised if your choices get you into hot water. You can say, well, he's making those choices from being influenced by mental health stuff. And sure, definitely can be a thing. But there comes a point where that internal spiritual part where you try to live by spiritual principles and take some of the suggestions you would hear in those communities, like a 12-step program. It's absolutely what they need. And if they were to do that, I've never seen it not help someone. Let's put it like that. People who do it, I've never seen someone's life like not improve. Now, that doesn't mean bad things can't happen to them that are unrelated. Of course they can. Life still happens. Life still happens whether we're using or not. But in fact, when you get clean, then life is more likely to happen because you're actually showing up. You're showing up and you're dealing with life. You're making more connections and you're doing things with your career and giving back. So there's all sorts of things that, to me, what the very same thing Nick didn't want to do probably would have been the best thing for him. He said 12-step programs were a cult, probably would have been the best thing for him.
In the interview, Nick went on to say there was a level of self-medication with his substance abuse. Quote, there was a level of doing something radical and doing something to get outside of myself and comfort zone. He also felt being in and out of rehab made him feel less alone. Nick Reiner added, there's other people out here that suffer from addiction and they're willing to talk about it. That's why I think we did this movie, because we feel it's important to be upfront about this sort of stuff. And making the film was not a smooth process. Both Rob and Nick admitted to tension between them while making the film. Rob added, I told him many times he's the heart and soul of the film, and he would have better insights as to what the main character was experiencing than I would. I would defer to him. Also on Kimmel last night, if you missed it, the host himself put his nemesis, Donald Trump.
And hold on. And I think from all those interviews about being Charlie, Rob really was trying to help Nick and trying to get him to get started in the movie making business. And he was trying to be supportive and encouraging him. He was trying. I think he was genuinely trying. I just think he was kind of running up against a brick wall. He was running up against a brick wall. Part of that brick wall is addiction and mental illness, but he wasn't truly connecting, right? And again, you can't truly connect with someone that doesn't want to connect. I don't think Nick really wanted to connect. He was on his own wavelength, and that was it. It's really a tragedy in that regard, but I don't blame Rob for that at all. Not at all.
On blast for his comments about Rob Reiner and his murder. Kimmel shares, what we need in a time like this, besides common sense when it comes to pews and mental health care, is compassion and leadership. We did not get that from our president because he has none of it to give. Instead, we got a fool rambling about nonsense. We got a brief moment of respect for our friends in Australia. We got a brief moment of condolence followed by things happen for students at Brown. And for Rob and Michelle Reiner, we got this. Jimmy went on to read Trump's disturbing post about Rob and Michelle's death before calling it hateful and vile. Just when you think he can't go any lower, he somehow finds a way to do that. His description of what happened, of course, is not at all what happened. This is exactly what I spoke about before. This rush to pin the tail on the donkey in pursuit of the Trump-friendly narrative, not to mention blaming his death on the fact that he is an outspoken liberal, insulting someone who's just been murdered, who leaves children behind without having any idea of what actually happened. It's so hateful and vile. The comedian recalled that when his wife, Molly, showed him Trump's post, he didn't think it was real. How wrong he was. Jimmy continued, even for him, that seemed like too much. But nothing is ever too much for him. That corroded brain is in charge of our lives. If you voted for that, it's okay to reconsider. It's perfectly fine. Due to his own experiences with Rob Reiner, Jimmy said he knows the director would want us all to keep calling out Trump's atrocities, and he plans to do so. Quote, I will say, I imagine
this guy must be a very leftist guy, liberal guy. I don't really know too much about this guy.
From my personal interactions with Rob Reiner that he would want us to keep pointing out the loathsome atrocities that continue to ooze out of this sick and irresponsible man's mouth. And so we're going to do that over and over again until the rest of us wake up. I don't think they will, Jimmy. I don't think they will. And as I shared with you all yesterday, after Mr. Kirk's offing, Rob Reiner expressed so much sympathy and remorse and sadness. The opposite of what Donald Trump did when Rob Reiner had his throat slashed.
That is true. Rob Reiner did say that on Piers Morgan, where he talked about what a tragedy that was. That is true.
Violently. And one of the glimmers of light that we've seen in the last few days, just the last 2.5 days, is remembering Rob Reiner, not just for being a wonderful actor and director, but also for his advocacy work. Did you know that Rob co-founded the American Foundation for Equal Rights, the nonprofit famous for sponsoring the fight against Prop 8 in California, which led to the 2010 trial, which preceded Obergefell versus Hodges? Basically,
I don't know what any of this is.
Rob Reiner played an integral part in helping to legalize same-sex marriage.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay. I think they've gone off the track here. Let's see. Jumpsuit Pablo has a couple videos I want to go over now.
This video, no big intro, just going to get right to it because I've been looking into this for the past few days and it's just, I've taken a total left turn. You saw my first 2 videos and my only 2 videos about this case so far.
Well, we should watch the first one first. I lied to you all.
Nick Reiner will not survive in prison, but that's if he even goes there at all, since the latest news that his team plans to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Now, as someone who spent 10 years in prison myself, I'll explain exactly why not only would his life be a living hell if he did convince the court that he's insane, but also what exactly will happen to him if he does, in fact, get sentenced to prison. What gangs want to get their hands on him? What do the other inmates think of his charges? And what will ultimately get him killed behind bars? I'll explain everything. Let's get started.
So me personally, I like learning from people that have been through what they're talking about. This guy's been to jail, or prison, I should say. Prison's different than jail. So he knows what he's talking about in this regard. I like hearing from the horse's mouth.
Nick Reiner is diagnosed with schizophrenia. He has been for a while. And his medication was...
And I would pause because that has not been confirmed. The source close to TMZ said that. The source is probably Nick Reiner's defense team and Alan Jackson, but I'm not positive that's the source, but it probably is. But until a doctor confirms that diagnosis, I'm not going to believe it 100% yet.
Switched by a brand new doctor 3 weeks prior to the murders. This medication switch was not going well. On top of the fact that he was mixing this with substance abuse. This is according to sources close to him. His team is officially planning to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. The main thing they're going to have to prove there, was he consciously aware that what he was doing is wrong and criminal? Well, I'll tell you now, it's not like the judge will be like, all right, I believe you. You're crazy. And then he goes home and sits on the couch and opens up a bag of Cheetos and turns on Netflix. Whew, that was close. Got away with that. No, you're going to a mental asylum where you are surrounded all day, every day by who knows how many dozens of genuinely insane and psychotic individuals. And if they're not acting insane and psychotic and erratic around you all the time, then they're just being heavily sedated. And so you're around, 40 to 50 just zombie-like other individuals. So take your pick. No, it would still be awful. I keep seeing this argument. Oh, well, there's this, remember that one woman who got the insanity plea and they sent her to a mental asylum. And then, eventually they deemed that she was now mentally sane and better. And they let her go. Yeah, they did. That's true. You know how long that took? She was in there I believe almost 30 years before that happened. It's not like he's going home next week. But anyways, will inmates care about his charges? Are they going to be mad that he stabbed his father and mother, allegedly stabbed his elderly father and his elderly mother? He killed elderly people. He killed his family members. He stabbed a woman. He hurt a woman. Like any of these reasons, will they care about any of that?
Well, someone asked in the chat, why is Hollywood so quiet? And I would think maybe the same reason why there wasn't that many people at his roast into the year 2000. And that's one of the things that even Billy Crystal said at that roast is, where is everybody here? Where is everybody? There's me, Al Franken, the dude from The Godfather. But who else? Where were they all? I don't know. It makes me wonder, maybe Rob Reiner was more in his little bubble, perhaps. Or I don't know. I really don't know why.
No, they don't give a crap. What do you think they're in there for? They don't care. No, they don't care about that. They do not care about that. So he doesn't have to worry about any issues because of that. He's got some things he needs to worry about, but it's not because of his charges. And so I'm just kind of shutting down that theory right there. I don't care who gets on here and tells you that someone's going to be upset because he murdered old people, family members, or a woman. Either of those three categories. That's what pissed off the inmates. No, it's not. They don't care about that. These inmates would...
Now, what the inmates do care about is if you mess with kids. Now, here's a story for you all. Story time. So there was a person I knew rest in peace to this man, because he overdosed and he's gone. One of my many friends who's now gone. But he told me before he left that when he would go to prison, he would go, not even prison, I should say, he would go to the county jail first. And when you're at the county jail, so people stay there for shorter amounts of time, or they stay there while they wait for their court case to go through. And he would say what would happen is the guards would talk to the other inmates and say, if there was a guy that was messing with kids, they would tell the other prisoners, hey, this guy messes with kids. And the cue is, yeah, get that guy. And the guards will look the other way if there's some jailhouse justice in a way. So that's absolutely what happens.
Love to kill their baby mamas who quit answering their phone calls and sending them $20 a week and got with a new man. They love to kill them. They don't care if you hurt women. These guys, they don't give a crap. These guys would fight 70-year-old correctional officers if they came in there and tried to take their contraband and take their phone. They don't care about hurting old people. They don't care. These guys didn't care enough to not go to prison and stay out in society to lead and take care of their family. Why would they care if this random guy who they don't even know murdered his family? They don't care about any of that. Anyone who tells you they do is just going off of what's happened in like prison movie.
Prisoners pick and choose. They pick and choose what they find important. They certainly don't find everything important, and they certainly are selfish in many other ways. But I think some of them enjoy doing that to the people that mess with kids. It's not even as much about doing a grand service for the rest of the world. Some of them enjoy like kicking the crap out of people. I mean, bikers are known for that too, right? They'll take care of that.
And stuff. Is he a physical threat? This is something that needs to be addressed. And I do this series a lot. Would they survive? Would they not survive? It's not just him. I do this with, I've made countless videos about all these big cases. And this is something that has to be taken into consideration, because the inmates are going to take it into consideration, because that is relevant in this new society you are being thrown into. This place is ruled by fear and violence. And there's no guns. A toddler could pick up a gun and mistakenly just pull the trigger and shoot a 300-pound bodybuilder. I mean, no. Everything here, are you violent? Can you fight? Are you strong? Are you dangerous? Will you fight? It's a whole different thing. And so we got to look at his stats. His booking information shows he's 6'3", 230 pounds. He's not a little guy. I'm 6 foot, 220 pounds. But I think my 220 looks a lot different from his 230. And my 220 looks a lot different from someone else's 185 who takes way better care of themselves and lives in the gym and is just pure muscle. I throw a few weights around, but I also eat burgers and have a few beers on the weekend, But this guy, he's built like a bag of warm vanilla pudding. Okay, you got a little size, but there's no perceivable threat behind that size. Now, you do have the stomach and the mentality. Clearly, they will take note of this. I don't care if you agree. I don't care how you feel about it. The inmates who need to survive there and assess any potential threat to themselves, they will take notice that, yes, if he's in there and found guilty, he will and has the capacity to stab you to death and take your life from you with a knife. Is there a difference between doing that to 70-year-old mom while she's snuggled up in bed, and doing that to 250-pound ripped Tyrone, who's been in there 20 years, and he's the co-leader of the biggest gang in the prison. Yeah, of course. Two entirely different worlds. Yes, I know. But do you know how many people in prison they don't have the stomach? Not that that's a bad thing. They don't have the stomach to murder a 70-year-old woman while she's asleep in bed. They just can't do it. Again, that's not a bad thing. In prison, it kind of is. You're not. So you drop down on the threat level, and you are as valuable as you are threatening. The only way that doesn't apply is if you are able to provide a financial benefit, if you are able to produce money. And then you're probably going to get extorted by the violent, threatening people. So all I'm saying is, yes, doesn't mean they're going to be like, oh my gosh, Michael Myers just walked in the cell block. But he will take a life. And there's a lot of guys in there who won't. And he will rise above them in threat perception. Now, I'm really just explaining that for educational purposes because ultimately that's not going to matter. And I would say within his first year, starting now, honestly, within his first year, he's 6'3" and he weighs 230. I guarantee you within a year, he'll be like 170. He's going to lose weight, and he's going to lose weight fast. Especially because he doesn't have any money. He himself doesn't have any money. Yeah, I know your parents are rich Hollywood superstars and movie producers and all that, and actors. You killed them.
I mean, most people don't gain weight in prison because you just don't have access to the junk food a lot of times. You can try to get things from the commissary, but you'll notice, look, without sodas and candy bars and heavy-duty carbs, processed foods, like, you're just not going to be able to eat as many calories, period.
I don't think any other relatives are going to come and just start feeding you money, dumping millions onto you. Like, where are you going to get money from? So you're essentially going to be broke in prison, which is, oh my gosh, you have nothing. You're screwed. So now you don't even have you can't even pay for protection. Okay. So what's going to happen is he's going to go in there. He's going to be in prison. He's going to be in a very dangerous prison. He's going to be in a maximum prison in California where it's all racially divided, whites, blacks, and Hispanics. Are the whites going to accept you? Probably not, man, because I doubt it. They might pretend to accept you, but never really accept you, just to kind of manipulate you into doing things for them that are high risk.
I mean, I've wondered also, would he even be put in Gen Pop anyway? You're a celebrity's kid. Sometimes they put them in protective places just for their own safety. I don't know if they would do that in this case, but just something to think about.
That any real prestigious, just valued actual members of the white gang don't want to risk doing, we can just get him to do it. They call it a crash test dummy. Let's see if he survives or not. Let's just crash him into a wall and let's see if he lives. And if it works out, hey, it works. If it doesn't, that's his problem. We got him to do it, not us. Called a crash test dummy. That's how he's going to be used in there, especially because he doesn't have any money. Here's the thing. You're either valuable to someone or you're useless to everyone. And you don't want to be useless to everyone in this very unique neighborhood you're now living in. Because now nobody cares what happens to you or who does what to you. Nobody's going to speak up. Nobody's going to do anything. There's no prison politics, which that is a very, very real thing. Nothing's going to, you don't have anything or anybody. Because nobody, what are you doing for anybody? Like everything is survival for the individual. You're not contributing in any way, not even in the smallest way to my survival. And so why do I care what happens to you? Here's how he can survive. He's going to be a cockroach at the bottom of the food chain in prison. He's going to be at the bottom of the hierarchy. But that could let him survive for so long. Let me tell you how. A few examples. He gets put into the cell with an inmate. They have contraband. They have drugs. They have a weapon. They have a cell phone they're not allowed to have. They've bought this stuff. They've gotten this stuff, but they don't want to get caught with this stuff.
I don't know about you, chat, but so far this video doesn't really seem that informative to me. But what do you think?
Hey, man. If any officers ever bust into this room and do a random shakedown, or they get an anonymous tip that I have stuff I'm not supposed to have, and they shake down this cell and search this cell and find this stuff, you are going to speak up and say it's yours. Do we agree? Because if we agree, I will go ahead and put the word out. Nobody touch this guy. Leave him alone. Don't bother him. Don't beat him up. Don't stab him. Don't whatever. Don't. Because I need him. Because he's my fall guy. He's my scapegoat. He's my extra life in this video game I'm playing. Right? I need him. So leave him alone. That's how that's going to work. So you're only surviving because you're willing to ultimately, and trust me, one day it will happen. Nobody's going to go in there for 10, 20 years and just possess things they're not allowed to have and just never get their cell searched and have it found.
So we're 14 minutes into a 25-minute video, and I've basically learned almost nothing about what he's going to do in prison, besides that he might lose some weight and he may or may not be accepted. Like, oh, we needed this video to tell us that?
Or, you know how I feel about, everything's accurate in the first video about what Nick Reiner is going through currently in the county jail. That's all legitimate and verified. The second video and most recent one, these are my interpretations as someone who did 10 years in prison. And just, I know how it goes. And I know if the scenario, I described several scenarios, several directions that he could go into and why it makes sense that he might go into those. And everything that would happen in either of those scenarios is still true. It's still valid. It still is correct. But now I don't see him going into either of those, when before I did. But the one scenario I was like, he'd be lucky if he could have it turn out this way, but he won't. I've changed my mind, or you could say I was wrong to think he wouldn't. But what I've been researching the past few days really changed my mind, and it's crazy because here's the thing. Someone paid a lot of money for one of the most prestigious criminal defense lawyers in the country, Alan Jackson. I mean, this guy has represented huge names. And now this is his lawyer. He charges $2,000 per hour to work on a case. $2,000 an hour. I don't have $2,000 this hour. $2,000 an hour. Insane. Where is Nick Reiner, the guy who, flunks out of every rehab and, he can't, he shows up in sweatpants and a tattered long sleeve shirt to a A-list Hollywood party. Where is that guy getting this kind of money from? $2,000 an hour. Well, that's what I've been looking into. And so there's two theories. There's really only two theories here, and both of them sound plausible, logical, and
I thought we already knew the answer to this question. I think the answer to this question is the siblings put him on retainer. I thought that's what we heard. Because who else would be? I mean, before I realized that, I thought there's a possibility Alan Jackson is just taking this case pro bono to get his name out there more. But we learned he's actually on retainer. And then considering what the siblings said, considering the siblings are blaming the doctors, then it made more sense to me. Okay, they are probably paying for his defense. They're the one that got Alan Jackson on retainer. But let's see what he says.
I think either of them could very well be the correct answer. I will tell you, I'm going to tell you what they are in case you don't know, but I will tell you now, it doesn't matter which one of them is true.
But here's the other thing, though, Lewis. I've heard that California actually has a rule that an estate can't pay under certain circumstances. I don't remember what those circumstances are, but there is something where, depending on the crime, legally, an estate can't. For someone else, I think is what it is. I have to look into that rule.
The same result will come from either theory being the correct one. One is Nick Reiner. Sources close to the family say Nick Reiner was never financially independent. Not hard to believe. He's a junkie. He's a degenerate, Not hard to believe. You're depending on your parents. That's how it goes. His parents left him a large sum of money in their estate, in their will, if ever they were to pass. And now they've passed. And it's like, yeah, but he killed them. And there is a law here that states, Nick Reiner, whoever, you're not allowed to financially benefit from anyone that you kill. That's a whole thing in California. Yeah, I get that. It has to be proven that he killed them before that goes into effect. And so it's very likely this is a $200 million fortune left behind, by the way. Maybe he gets all 200 million. Maybe it's him and his two other siblings and it's split, which is still like what? 60, 70, 75,000. I mean, come on, give me a break. More than enough money I'll hold off on what he can do inside prison or in even a mental institution with that money. The only two places he'll ever go. Anyone saying he's just going to go home is...
So it's called the Slayer rule in California. In California law, the Slayer rule, more formally called the Slayer statute, is a legal rule that prevents someone from inheriting from a person they have intentionally and feloniously killed. Its purpose is to ensure that no one can financially benefit from their own wrongful killing of another person. What the Slayer rule says in California, under California Probate Code 250, if a person feloniously and intentionally kills another person, the descendant, they are not entitled to any property, interest, or benefit from that person's estate. This includes inheritance under a will, benefits from a trust, property received by interstate succession, quasi-community property, and other benefits they would otherwise receive upon the decedent's death. The law treats the killer as if they predeceased the victim for purposes of inheritance. In practical terms, that means their share is skipped and goes to other heirs as if the killer had already died. It's civil, not criminal. The Slayer rules applied in probate civil court not criminal court. So even without a criminal conviction, a probate court could determine the rule applies based on civil standards. That's important. Intent matters. The killer must have acted intentionally and feloniously. Accidental deaths or justified killings, e.g., self-defense, typically do not trigger this rule. Broad coverage, the rule applies not only to wills, but also to trusts and other property or benefits tied to the descendant's estate. No windfall, the goal is to uphold justice and prevent a murderer from gaining financially from their crime.
Full of crap, and they're clickbaiting. I've seen someone earlier, it's like, guys, we need to be concerned because there's, oh my gosh, there's all these examples of people in California who murdered people who had mental problems, just as, truly Nick Reiner did have mental problems. They had mental problems too, and they killed people, and they were eventually let go. Just free to go home. And I'm like, who are these people? I press pause. Whoa, that's pretty wild. Educate me. Inform me. Change my opinion. Let's hear what you have to say. I click play again. Yeah, Johnny McGee out of such and such county of California. He murdered somebody, and he was deemed to be insane. And after 30 years, they found him to be mentally competent and sane and healed, and they let him go. Can you believe it, people? Oh, that's your big, like, fishing hook. Like, hey, it's been done before. This guy, he can be insane, and they'll let him go in like 3 days after he killed his parents. This guy got found to be insane, and so 30 years later, they finally let him go? Okay. 30 years of what? 30 years of like heavy medication, sedation, like programs. Like, this guy doesn't even have, this isn't even the same person anymore mentally, I bet you. Not that he's a saint, not that he's just like Mr. Rogers in the neighborhood, but it's just like, dude, he has gone through... maybe he deserves to never get out, whoever this person was. But it's like, I mean, come on. Are we just trying to infuriate people? 30 years, man, I'm 33. That's just 3 years less than I've been on this planet. And this was a grown adult. Like, I think they did quite a bit of time. You're trying to rile people up by making them think Nick Reiner is not going to, at the bare minimum, because he whether he goes to a mental institution or a prison, probably never going to go home. At the bare minimum, best case scenario for him, 25, 30, 35 years later, you might go home.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I've said too. I mean, best case, like 3 decades from now, he gets what the attempted assassin of Reagan got and released after 30 years. That's a best case. But even that case, the guy who attempted to assassinate Reagan, he didn't succeed. That's a big difference, right? Nick succeeded in what he did.
If you can pass the old ink blot test. Yeah, I mean, what are we talking about? So what? Is that not enough? Yeah, no, it's probably not. But like, let's not sit here and like turn red in the face and just like have smoke coming out of our ears. Like, oh my gosh, the justice system. As if 30 years is not like, that's still like, dude, if I committed a crime and they sentenced me to 30 years, I'm telling you right now, I'm not doing it. If you catch my drift. I will dunk my head in the toilet and flush it until I just fill my lungs with water. I'm not doing no 30. Man, listen. No. That's still awful.
And that's why they put Nick in that suit, to prevent that from happening.
Which they deserve. That's first of all, that's my thinking on that. And I've seen a few like YouTubers like bring up that, like, he could get out in 30 years. Oh, the injustice. I mean, I guess, but I mean, 30 years is 30 years, buddy. Like 30 years ago, we didn't have the internet. Like, I actually have a side interest that you may not know about. I actually collect colognes. And so I wanted to put you on to one that I've been wearing a lot lately. Gravite. This expensive lawyers and legal team is being paid for by his siblings who have legitimate access to their parents' fortune, inheritance, etc. Me personally, I would like to not believe that because one of these siblings is a sister.
You would like to not believe it, but if you've heard what they said, it's probably true. I mean, they're blaming the doctors, not Nick. So I think they're kind of taking their deceased parents' stance with Nick and trying to be very understanding. And I think they're paying for it.
You know, the sister who found the parents dead in the bed with stab wounds and their throats slit. And what did she do? Immediately called 911 and said, hey, my parents have been murdered. I need help. By the way, I don't know who did this, but, between you and me, I know who did this. It was my brother. Go get him. Go grab him. Go get him right now. He killed my parents. He killed our parents.
Someone commented this video to me and requested that I go over it. So I decided to give it a chance.
Piece of crap. He killed our parents. You're telling me that same girl is paying for one of the most prestigious criminal defense lawyers in the history of America? For what? To make sure that he doesn't get in trouble for committing the crime that she called the police to tell them that he did? I don't know. It's not really, call me, I don't know. Should I put on a tinfoil hat? It's just kind of not adding up to me. Now, with both of those theories being put out there and explained, it doesn't matter which one it is. I'm sure it's one of those. Doesn't even really matter because either way, if his family, his siblings, whoever is supporting him, they're paying for the lawyer, that's where that's coming from. Okay. That means he still has millions of dollars worth, if, at the very least, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of financial support while he's in prison or wherever. Okay. If it's not them, and I really don't think it is, and he has access for now, and probably at least for the next year, because, trials take so long to get to after you've been arrested. So before he's found guilty and loses access to those funds, you have at least a year, probably more, and still have access to millions of dollars worth of financial aid. And so either way, whether he's going through his lawyer and getting his lawyer to do this stuff, or through his family and getting his family to do this stuff, he has so way beyond what you really even need in prison to secure your safety and just to ensure the fact that you will live the best life you can live behind bars or in an institution, whether prison or psychiatric. It doesn't take millions. It really doesn't. And so right now, he either, if his siblings aren't doing it, he's having his lawyer do it. Anyone who knows what they're doing, which I really think it's his lawyer, probably in charge of his funds, or not in charge, but just, he's the one dishing out what needs to be done behind the scenes while y'all have time. Every influential person in the California state prisons, that's going to be 1 to 2 top-ranking gang members of every gang. That would be the smart thing. You don't have to pay off every gang member. If you pay off the 1 to 2 gang members who control the entire gang, Well, then they'll tell all the members under them, don't you touch them. Actually, take good care of them. So you just got to do 1 to 2 for each gang, and that's probably 4 or 5 gangs at most in California. And that's peanuts. I mean, you could pay a lump sum to each person right now, and it wouldn't put a dent in their fortune. And you are good the entire time. For the entirety, you're good. You're fine. No one's going to lay a finger on you unless you do something absolutely ridiculous, unforgivable. And even then, if you pay enough money, they might even still, like whoever you did that to, the big dogs might come and be like, hey, man, listen, I get it. I understand. I understand how angry you are and you want to get them. And like, oh boy, like no one should ever be allowed to get away with that, what he did or said or however he disrespected you. I get it. But listen, you got to understand. You got to understand what he means to us. And they'll probably give this guy something like, leave him alone and we'll do this for you. We're going to give you this, just because we know. I know. As a man, I know it's hard. I know it's hard to let that go, but we really need you to let it go. You're going to have to let that go, but we're going to do something real nice for you, and that might be monetary or just anything. So even in the worst case scenario, I don't see, if he has access to those funds right now, there is no universe that exists where Nick Reiner has a finger laid upon him in prison. Absolutely not. And I don't care. I see people on it. Oh, well, when those inmates find out what he did, what did he do? He killed a grown woman and a grown man. Okay. Like, who do you think he's locked up with? What do you think they did? Why do you think they care about that? Okay. What do these other people do? We saved the lives of too many children, so we got sent to prison. Like, well, you think they're in there for being heroes? Like, they hurt people. They robbed people. They sold drugs to people. They killed people. They beat people. Men, women, yeah. They don't give a crap. They don't know them. They don't care. So what? They don't care what he did or who he did it to. They don't give a crap. All they care about is, oh man, you were like you're in a famous family. Y'all are like big shots in Hollywood. Yeah, y'all got a lot of money. We should probably figure something out. We should probably figure out how you're going to give us a bunch of money and we're going to make sure that nothing happens to you. And they will. They will make sure nothing happens to him if they give them a lot of money, which why would you not? If the relatives are funding the lawyer, you're doing that because you care about his safety, his future, and his life. And so why would you not, if he goes to prison, same thing. You care about his safety, his future, and his life in prison. Pay 30 grand, pay 25 grand to 4, 5, 6 different inmates. What is that? Are y'all going to go broke after you pay that? No, that's nothing to y'all. If it's him and he has access, he's going to go ahead and secure those funds now, and he's going to get it to his lawyer, and his lawyer is skilled enough. He's going to talk to the right people in California who are in these organizations and get that all sorted out and get that all worked out before he even sets foot in a prison. He's going to be golden before he ever even gets there. And so I know a lot of people are going to watch this, and I know a lot of people want to watch a video and hear about how much karma Nick Reiner is going to get and how bad it's going to be for him. I know that's what you want to hear. And I know if I got on here and I lied to you and told you that's what would happen, then you would be like, yeah, thank you. And you'd leave a like and love this video. And I know there's going to be a lot of people getting, you don't know what the hell you're talking about, you piece of crap. He's going to get, you're going to be in denial and you're not going to want to hear it. I understand that. And I'm sorry that this upsets you, but this is the truth. This is how it really works in prison. This ain't the movies. This ain't Netflix. You got the money. You live in the good life back there. And people are like, yeah, I mean, you can live as good a life as you want, but you're still in prison. True. And I promise I'm not trying to make you angrier, but I'm just being honest. You got to understand, the life you can live in prison can be great. It can be greater than the life you live outside of it if you have enough money and influence. What can you, what, okay, if you have $1 million and you go to prison.
I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I haven't really learned anything from this video.
Hey, down here.
Ugh.
You may have heard the breaking news this morning, but I've got 10 updates for you all. This video is going to cover a lot of ground. Hello, my fam. It is Perez, the queen of all media, the original influencer, and I would have come at you sooner with this.
So in terms of that other guy, before I get into this video, I mean, I bet you there's other like topics that he might actually have an interesting take on. But in terms of this one, not so much. Not so much. Now, in terms of the evidence against Nick, it seems like the blood in the hotel room is part of the evidence. The fact that Nick didn't even seem taken aback that he was getting arrested at the time. It seemed to be coming. Now, could he sue TMZ? Anything's possible, but why would he do that when Alan Jackson's probably the one leaking the information to them? That's not confirmed, but who else would be? I mean, even his siblings would know not to talk, right? They're leaving it up to Alan Jackson and the defense team. And we don't know about the murder weapon yet either. The DA said at a press conference almost 2 weeks ago now that whatever they have, they're going to present at the trial. They didn't let us know if they found it. They didn't let us know anything about a toxicology report either.
But I had a colonoscopy today and I saw the big breaking news literally as my name was being called to go into pre-op. So here we are. And yes, right here, I will be sharing with you later a vlog about my colonoscopy experience. I know some people might criticize me for even mentioning that, but my anxiety and OCD had to mention why I'm late. I hate being late with breaking news, but here we are. And TMZ, which broke the news, didn't do a very good job with follow through, which I'm gonna do. First, the breaking news. The late director Rob Reiner's 32-year-old son, Nick Reiner, is locked up, thankfully, and has been officially charged.
So Jill says they said there was no substances in his system when he was arrested. Where did you hear that, Jill? I'll have to look into that claim, because as far as I know, I have not heard anything about any toxicology report. So let us know where you heard that.
With the murder of his father and mother, photographer Michelle Reiner. But today we're hearing shortly before mom and dad had their very gruesome ending, Nick here was diagnosed as schizophrenic and that the medication made him dangerous. Pause. If that's true, the doctor, the psychiatrist who was overseeing Nick Reiner's treatment, wouldn't that person be liable? And if he was dangerous and schizophrenic and his meds being adjusted, shouldn't he have been under constant medical supervision? I'll play devil's advocate, and maybe his father's celebrity had something to do with that not happening. But still, the doctor is probably liable, right? In some capacity, for some part of it. No? That's not all, though. Yes, as is speculated, Nick, prior to him allegedly slitting his parents' throats and stabbing them to death, was also abusing substances. So, heavy hug use and schizophrenia medication, not a good combo. And how do we know all of this? I will say my fairly good assumption is that Nicky Boy's new attorney, Alan Jackson, has begun his job and is blabbing to TMZ. Harvey over at TMZ says that they believe, translation, the lawyer hasn't confirmed, but hinted and said that this is probably what they're going to do, is not contest that Nick committed the atrocious crimes. However, they're going to go for a not guilty by reason of insanity plea. But in some real shoddy journalism, what TMZ did not tell the public is it's not going to get him out of serving time. Not guilty by reason of insanity just means instead of going to the not so pleasant prison, he'll go to the not so present psych hospital where he will be locked up for the same amount of time and possibly even longer. That's right. Even longer is a possibility, depending on if he gets life without parole or not. But the process of being released from the psych hospital is not quick or easy. He, in the future, will have to prove that he no longer has this schizophrenia, or that it's very well controlled with medication, and that he's no longer a danger to society. And that's all if he is found guilty by reason of insanity, which is far from certain. Because as I speculated, and I'm sure the DA, the prosecutor's office, the detectives, all local law enforcement are still putting the pieces together, and all of this evidence might make a very compelling argument to a jury that Nicky here premeditated the murders, and the whole fleeing, the whole running away, not a good look for him either. If they can prove planning, attempt to conceal, like if he left behind the murder weapon at the Santa Monica hotel, if he disposed of it somehow.
It's amusing that he says schmurder. I don't have to say that for some reason. Hasn't dinked me yet. Maybe I should knock on wood.
Oh, all of this will factor in if, as his lawyer is telegraphing to TMZ, they go ahead and ask for a trial by jury where they will, make the claim not guilty by reason of insanity. However, I still believe that they might be working towards a plea deal, which is why they didn't really fully commit to TMZ that this is what they're going to do. In the months leading up to Rob and Michelle's death, Nick was in a very fancy treatment facility that costs $70,000 a month and specializes in not just substance abuse, but also mental health issues. And I would like to know what the name of that facility is, because they don't do a very good job. According to the spin we are being fed today, the meds that Nick was given made him erratic and dangerous. Two sources with direct knowledge tell TMZ Nick was under the care of a psychiatrist for mental illness. We're told in the month before the murders, Nick's behavior had gotten alarming. 3 to 4 weeks before his parents' killing, doctors changed his meds and he became even more erratic. Sources say doctors were trying to adjust the medications so Nick stabilized, but it wasn't working. A source tells TMZ once the meds were changed, Nick was out of his head. And as you would imagine, his substance abuse only made the schizophrenia worse. Now, you may not have heard this. An impromptu memorial for Rob and Michelle was held this week at the home of Albert Brooks. Guests included Billy Crystal and Larry David, as well as Conan O'Brien and Bill Hader. Conan had a party last Saturday where Rob and his son got into a fight. Bill Hader also had a very uncomfortable confrontation with Nick Reiner at that party. During the memorial this week, according to an insider, an unnamed A-lister reportedly revealed that Rob had expressed being scared of what his son might do if left alone. And allegedly, at Conan's party, after getting into a fight with his son, he told a group of friends, quote, "I'm petrified of him. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm afraid of my son. I think my own son can hurt me." Obviously, this is the Daily Mail. I don't know how credible this is or not.
And if you're Rob Reiner and you think that, you have to trust your gut. And it's a heartbreaking thing to have to do. It's tragic. But just like when some kids have to cut off their narcissistic parent, sometimes a parent might have to kind of cut off a kid for their own safety and for their loved one's safety. Of course, does it always end in a tragedy like this? Of course not. But what can happen, though, is they can drag you down in other ways by stealing, getting in trouble with the law, maybe assaulting other family members. If there's no shame in protecting yourself, there's no shame in protecting your family members. That's not a bad thing to do. Some people would try to convince you, oh, you're giving up on them if you do that, or you're being brutal or too cold-hearted. No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. Sometimes it's necessary.
What we do know, though, is TMZ definitely has a direct line to Nick, his lawyer. I mean, a source, Alan Jackson, who got Karen Reed off the hook earlier this year, is telling us how the accused killer has been in prison this week. What's his mental state like? How's he feeling? A source says that Nicky is actually calm and in a daze after his parents' murder. The murders that he's been charged with committing. He's not fully been able to process it, TMZ has learned. A source with direct knowledge, Alan Jackson, says that Nick is not reeling in grief. Rather, he's in a fog, in no small part due to his medical condition and the meds he's taking. Sources tell TMZ that Nick is calm, cognizant, and dazed. How can you be both cognizant and dazed? Adding that Nick isn't even close to processing what happened. And back to the Daily Mail for a second, they claim, according to family insiders, Nick's family, his brother and sister, were actually the ones that linked him up with this very expensive new lawyer, which would explain why local news media got video of Alan Jackson outside the Reiner family home earlier this week. According to the Daily Mail, his siblings want him in a psychiatric hospital. So they believe that hiring this lawyer will help get that fate for their brother. Additionally, we have new video of Nick at around 4 a.m. Sunday, the day of the Schmurders, and let's look at it. I'm going to watch this for the first time with you. All right, so this is in Santa Monica. Where is he? Okay, he's there, making his way to the hotel, walking there, walking really calmly. I wonder why he didn't take a Lyft or an Uber at 4 a.m., 4:06 a.m. So this is all we're getting, a faraway view.
This is the first I've seen of this.
Okay.
I will say, this guy, the theater kid here, he's presented information that I have not heard any other channels present. So for that, he gets a +1.
I don't know. If somebody's truly out of it, if you're like a junkie and hardcore, like in the middle of it, like, are you even able to walk? If anything, I think that video is not going to be helpful for Nick's defense. Good. Additionally, we have learned that Rob and Michelle's bodies have been released to their family. As of now, there are no details on a service.
And yes, you can be high on all sorts of drugs and still walk. I mean, the only times you can't really walk is if like you're so doped out that you're dipping and you can hardly even stand up. Sometimes you'll be drunk enough so that you'll fall over and can hardly walk. Maybe you take enough benzos. But unfortunately, it's not the case with stimulants like meth. Like, you can still walk on meth. I mean, in fact, a lot of violent crimes are committed on meth.
Reiners were Jewish. It's unclear if they are going to honor Jewish practices with regards to what happens next. And with regards to Nick, as I mentioned earlier this week, he's going to be sitting pretty in jail because he did not enter a plea earlier this week, and his next hearing is not until the middle of January. Also, in the wake of this atrocity, we're learning a lot more about Nick Reiner. Old videos of his have started to go viral, such as this one where he jokes about killing a dog.
Yeah. Vaselina. I guess it could have been pretty awkward when PETA approached you about joining their team.
I'm gonna go kill that fucking dog. Who let the...
Okay.
And again, some people were saying he was playing a character when he was doing that. I tend not to think so. I look at all of his past patterns of behavior. It doesn't really seem like he was joking in any way when he said that. And other people, I think it was at the convenience store, said that it looked like Nick was tweaking. I'm not sure if it was the hotel that said that too, but people definitely said he was tweaking.
A lot of Nick's old interviews have also started to come back up and be part of the conversation. I've shared some with you before, but not this. In 2018, Reiner said in a podcast, quote, "If I went to 30 meetings in 30 days and I stayed sober for that whole time, that those 30 days seemed like 30 months. They're the worst 30 days of your life because you're just thinking about being sober every single day." Then he argued that moderation felt more humane than total restriction, even though I think almost every, if not every recovery program doesn't believe in moderation. They believe in sobriety. He says, though, as opposed to if you weren't to go crazy and just drink some beer, do whatever you got to do. Nick suggested that limited use might actually allow a person to function without constantly measuring their worth in sober days. Who knows? You might get some more work done during that period or something else that you want to get done. Translation, he hated being sober.
So Nick, that's telling as well that he didn't want to do the total abstinence way. And then some people would say, the critics of a 12-step program would say, oh, total abstinence isn't for everyone. But I would say, unfortunately, when it comes to heavy drug use, meth, heroin, crack, coke, I mean, coke's borderline heavy, but regardless, generally, you at least need some complete abstinence at the very least. And here's another example, Anthony Bourdain. So Anthony Bourdain used to be a heavy drug addict back in the day. And I guess maybe he stopped for a while, but he definitely drank. He definitely still drank. And I don't think that was good for his mental health. So again, I think when you've done that route, generally some abstinence would be good for you. But it's telling that he wasn't really for that. He wanted to do what he wanted to do. And we saw how that turned out.
He hated himself. He hates life. Right? Or he just did not want to be sober in 2018 or ever. Snyder.
And so, yeah, he might have been like using the drugs to quiet the voices in his head, but also there's psych medicines that can do that too. I mean, Abilify, Zyprexa, Seroquel, Geodon, to name a few, they also could do the same thing. They're just not as fun. Those things aren't as fun, maybe, as getting high on meth or whatever.
Had no motivation, it seems like, to be sober. He explains in 2018, "I'd just rather not spend my life just constantly ticking away at the days that I've stayed clean because I don't really feel staying clean is an accomplishment in life."
That's another telling thing to say. I mean, I think for someone in his shoes, it would be an accomplishment. For someone that had been to 18 rehabs, it would be an accomplishment. But it's telling that he didn't think so. And also, Ward, what did Anthony Bourdain joke about doing before his end? I didn't know he would joke about it. I mean, no, he absolutely did. He absolutely used to shoot heroin. If you read Kitchen Confidential, he would do a lot of coke and heroin. But I was under the impression he didn't do those things anymore. But maybe I'm wrong.
His poor parents. Because a lot of just clean people don't do great things. He also took aim at the rehab industry, accusing it of exploiting relapse and monetizing failure.
Now, he's kind of got a point with that in a way, right? Where he's looking at the addicts that Ernest Hemingway, Hunter S. Thompson, all of the rock stars. I mean, if it wasn't for drugs and drinking, would all of those people be who they are? Probably not. But that being said, does it cut short some of their careers? Absolutely. I mean, look at the grunge era. The grunge era is notorious for this. Lane Staley, Kurt Cobain, Chris Cornell, Scott Weiland, all of them dead from OD, except for Kurt, ended his own life. But heroin use was a big part in all of their stories. Now, if it wasn't for heroin, would they still be who they were? It's an interesting question to ponder. Maybe, maybe not. But also for all of them, it was part of the aura. It was part of the aura, that kind of druggy / rebellious thing. It was part of it's part of it, right? Most of the rock stars back in the day had some drinking and substances going on, for the very most part.
That might be accurate. He says, quote, AA and the rehab industry are a separate entity. What I do know is that 99% of the places say they are 12-step based, and literally they rip the entire program, which is intended to be a free service. And they make money off a program that if you relapse, they make even more money. Fair. And some of these places just, especially for the hardcore substance users, they get them off the illegal substances and they keep them on prescription alternatives. Somebody who worked with Nick back when he was an intern on Family Guy is speaking out and telling us what he was like back then, which seems to be pretty similar to who he is still. This happened in 2014, and this person who worked with Nick Reiner on Family Guy says he was an intern on the show for around 3 to 6 months. His father helped him get that gig. Apparently, Rob would drop him off and pick him up every day. He'd work 4 hours a day and spend most of his time shooting the shh with other employees. He did not work hard, and he wasn't a hard worker. He was 100% entitled. There was really no responsibility for him because we didn't have interns. It was a favor for Rob. This was shortly after he had gotten out of rehab. The former coworker says he was coming off rehab, so he was sober. This was part of his path to recovery. His whole identity was being sober. The former colleague remembered Nick as being captivating and goofy when he was younger, recalling his darkness was his humor. He has a dark sense of humor. He was a funny kid. He was charismatic in a dark, introverted way. He was a goofy 20-year-old, but he'd often say effed up things, dark things, with a tinge of humor. The former colleague adds, he was the black sheep. He felt like an F-up.
The black sheep! Oh my goodness.
He knew that. He was self-aware of how his family was doing and how he represented them in a negative space. But none of that felt offensive or scary. While the source remembers liking him, they weren't shocked when they heard the charges against him. I am not shocked. He is a troubled person. Nick had an aura of darkness around him with his addiction issues. When you have addiction and mental health, there is room for emotional murders. It doesn't seem unfounded. He was a troubled kid from a young age and had issues. And according to...
Now, what I had also heard was the dark and twisted. Now, he didn't mention the twisted part there. That seems like a little more of a favorable interpretation he gave in a way.
TMZ, Nick was a regular at a local gas station near his parents' home, where he would go buy cigarettes and other items. The unnamed employees say that when they saw Nick roughly 2 weeks prior to when he allegedly killed his parents, he looked exhausted and emotionally distant. One employee recalled that he was unusually standoffish, which had been a stark contrast to the friendly social presence they had grown accustomed to seeing. One of the employees at the gas station told TMZ that Nick appeared drained and abnormal in his behaviors just a few weeks before the awfulness. A few months prior to that, though, they recall him exchanging pleasantries, smiling, and even engaging in small talk. The difference, they say, was very notable. Also, in addition to that video that Nick had uploaded on the YT, his private Instagram account has been uncovered. And I'm not sorry, that guy looked scary in the eyes. Scarier than that. Frightening. That frightens me. That look just, that frightens me. Scary. Whatever. Fine. Once upon a time, simpler times. A lot of the old interviews with Nick have been from his appearances on this podcast called Dopey, which was about addiction and recovery. And we're actually now hearing from the host of that Dopey podcast. David Mannheim has opened up about his years-long friendship with Nick Reiner, which quietly ended after he made a simple and sensible request. Mannheim says he first connected with Nick Reiner in 2016 when Rob's son appeared on his podcast multiple times. The two bonded over addiction, recovery, creativity, and staying alive and sober in a rough world. Mannheim, who is sober himself after battling an H addiction, recalled that during Nick's earliest appearance on the podcast, the now 32-year-old even offered to call his dad during the conversation. Mannheim declined, saying it wasn't necessary. At the time, it seemed like a non-issue. But in 2018, Mannheim's co-host on the Dopey podcast, Chris O'Connor, died from a Fenta overdose, devastating Mannheim and the show's community. So Mannheim reached out to Nick with a request that would end up ruining their friendship. He asked if Nick's father could come on the podcast to help support. Nick's response? Ghosting. Mannheim explains, "I wish I hadn't asked to have Rob come on the show, or at least not when I did, because it pushed him away." Mannheim says Nick appeared offended by the request and stopped communicating altogether. Over the next 7 years, David claims he sent roughly 150 unanswered texts, never hearing back from someone he once considered close. Looking back, Mannheim describes the Nick he first met nearly a decade ago with tenderness and regret. Quote, "He was young and smart and handsome and new in recovery, and I was very excited to have him on our show because I was such a fan of Rob Reiner. I could relate to his stories. However," the Dopey host says, "I don't remember that he was particularly interested in 12-step work. I know he had been to treatment. I know he was involved in writing. I know he loved to play pickup basketball in New York City. I think he was interested in spirituality. Despite everything, there also was hope at the time," Mannheim recalls. Quote, "He demonstrated a young love of life, to be honest with you, and hopefulness. He wanted to be a part of what me and Chris were doing. He wanted to have fun in recovery, and he wanted to be a successful entertainment writer." Addiction. I was going to say something else. I was going to say he didn't want it badly enough, but I do believe addiction is a disease. I do believe that addicts don't want to be addicts, right? And right now, my thoughts continue to go.
And I think the benefit of labeling it as a disease is when you have the disease, a disease of total self-centeredness, that's where the spiritual part comes in. And the thing is, when you start getting the spiritual part right, then I think you're more likely to be able to get the mental health part right too. That's what I've seen for a lot of people. I mean, is anything going to be flawless? No. But I've seen for a lot of people, they get clean, they get the spiritual part down, they try to work a program, and then things fall in place for them. Does that mean it's perfect? No. Does that mean life stops happening? No. But I see people take action steps because now they have a community of people. They have a network. they have a sponsor, they have a home group, and it puts in place a lot of the ingredients of a happy and productive life.
Go to Rob and Michelle's other children. This is a report from People. They claim Rob and Michelle were beloved in Hollywood, and their friends like Billy Crystal and Albert Brooks are truly like.
Thank you so much for this, Light. Appreciate your work. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you too, Light. I'm happy to spend it all with the flock of black sheep here. I'm honored you're here spending it with me.
Family and fiercely protective. The Family Insider tells People that Jake and Romy Reiner will never be alone as they try to face this. So grateful and relieved that they have a strong support system. And exactly that. People goes on to say that Jake and Romy have been remaining strong with the help of Rob and Michelle's pals. Quote, they are being incredibly strong and have a huge support system they can lean on. It's, of course, been a huge shock to the system. This nightmare came out of nowhere for them, but they've been surrounded with support since the second they found out.
Nope. Danielle, thank you so much. Make it rain on Jared. Woohoo. Happy New Year. Thank you for all you do. I appreciate you too, Danielle. You've been here for a while supporting me. I appreciate the making it rain comments too. I love it. I love it.
Support to them. And thank you for your support to me by watching this. I appreciate you so much. I still think a plea deal is the most likely scenario here. What do you think? Let's discuss everything in the comments section.
So the second
interesting video there by him.
You may have heard the breaking news.
We got one more to play. "13 days ago. There you go.
This is Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Here now, Tony Bruschi.
Back in 2015, Rob Reiner sat down with the Los Angeles Times and said something that in hindsight it's almost unbearable to read. And this is not in any way to blame him, but hindsight is always 20/20. And as I've said from the beginning on this case, let this be a cautionary tale, because it's already a horrific tragedy for so many people. If we can find any sort of silver lining in this, it's being able to identify the problems here, what took place, what could maybe have been done differently to produce a different outcome. Because I think a lot of people are seeing the story and feeling the story and going, oh my God, this hits home in ways you can't even imagine. Because everybody's experience with individuals like this, with addicts, mentally ill people, can be dramatically different because the disease can be so crazy. But at the same point, very similar as well. So let's get into this part here. And if you don't mind, while you're listening, please do hit subscribe wherever it's at. If it's YouTube, search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. Same search on the podcast platforms. It allows other folks to know that we exist. You doing that signals, hey, people are interested in this and people are finding this valuable. Then other folks find it and it can be valuable and helpful to other people too. So thank you for that in advance. Okay. he was promoting being Charlie. Rob was
Yes, a grandiose narcissist would absolutely want to control the narrative. In terms of Rob, like, I bet you he had an ego, but I don't really detect narcissist vibes from him, at least from what I've seen in public. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen behind closed doors, but I just didn't detect it. I detect probably an ego. When you're worth at least 200 million and your name's Rob Reiner, you probably have some sense of an ego / superiority, but just because you feel that doesn't make you a narcissist. But again, I'm not completely ruling it out, but that's my thought.
Autobiographical film that he directed about his son Nick's battle with addiction. And he wanted to make something clear. The professionals had been wrong. You know, at that moment in time, people listened to him and go, oh my gosh, really? Tell me more. Because at that moment in time, in that little aversion to insanity that Nick's life had been on, it was a little bit of a divergent upswing. It was a moment of stability somewhat compared to the chaos that had been. And he was looking at this moment of stability going, look at this, we tried it this way. And now he's okay. But as many of us know, and as they soon learned after, those moments of stability with an addict, mentally ill individual, they don't last long. He said when Nick would tell us that it wasn't working for him, the rehab, we wouldn't listen, Rob said. We were desperate. And because the people had diplomas on their wall, we listened to them. We should have been listening to our son. His wife, Michelle, went further, said, we were so influenced by these people. She said, they would tell us he's a liar, that he's trying to manipulate us, and we believed them. And 10 years later, we know what happened. Rob and Michelle Reiner are now dead, stabbed to death in their Brentwood home, allegedly by that same son, the son the counselors warned them about, the son they publicly defended, the son they kept in a guest house on their property because they didn't know what else to do. And look, they had tried everything. In case you're new to this story and like, well, it's not a great idea to do that. They already tried to let him go live on the streets, hit rock bottom, see what happens. He survived. He came back, seemed to be doing a little bit better, and then spiral down. This is a story about addiction, yes, but it's also a story about something far more uncomfortable. The way people in active addiction can rewrite the families who love them, rewrite their stories, rewire the families, even turning that love into a tool of control, isolation, and ultimately destruction. And it's a story about how sometimes, not always, but sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do for someone you love is refuse.
So the problem is, Reels, there's no evidence you're going to accept outside of what the prosecution presents at the trial. There's no other evidence you're going to accept. You're just going to dismiss it or say it's not true. So for you, there's nothing anyone can say right now, because the real evidence the prosecution is not going to present until the trial, if there is one.
To walk away. Nick Reiner first went to rehab at 15 years old. By his own account, he cycled through 17 or 18.
And then you need to answer the question, what is the evidence you would accept now? Because they already said they're not going to present any murder weapon until the trial. So what are you referring to then?
Facilities over the next several years. Heroin, cocaine, those are the allegations, whatever else was available. He experienced periods of homelessness in Maine, New Jersey, and Texas, not because his family abandoned him, but because he refused to go to the programs they recommended. Quote, if I wanted to do it my way and not go to the programs they were suggesting, then I had to be homeless, he told People magazine. Back in 2016, he said that, almost 10 years ago. He framed this as his parents' fault. The implicit message was clear. You made me live on the streets because you wouldn't let me do recovery my own way. Yeah, because you know what? Recovery for a mentally ill addict their own way doesn't mean recovery. This is how it works.
Correct. Doing it their own way certainly isn't always the best way. And this is the distinction I would make, right? When you're talking to someone that's an addict, you have to make sure you're talking to the version of them that truly wants what's best for them. Because if you're talking to the version of them that wants to continue to use, that person's not trustworthy. That person's going to lie, manipulate, and be deceitful. Now, again, how do you know which version you're talking to? One, it requires you to have at least a little bit of a connection with that person to be able to tell the difference. But even if you do have a connection, they can still try to lie and to manipulate. We see this a lot when someone has a romantic partner that's an addict. Like, you would think you're connected, but almost certainly that substance or alcoholism is going to get in the way of the connection, which makes it tough. So the point of the matter is, if someone really wants what's best for themselves, that person is trustworthy if you're truly talking to that person, and you'll know because they're putting in the footwork to change. They're showing the willingness. They're being compliant with some sort of program of recovery. If they're not doing those things, you have to be really careful. And this is where the specifics, if we knew them about the past, would really be helpful, if you ask me. And to know, like, which one was it? If I were to hear the way Rob and Nick were arguing with one another, I'm pretty sure I'd be able to say, okay, I can sense what's going on here.
Addict learns to flip the script. The family sets the boundary. You need to go to treatment, and the addict responds by escalating the stakes. Fine, I'll be homeless. I'll sleep on the streets. I could die out there. And suddenly the boundary isn't about protecting the family anymore. It's about whether the family is willing to let their child die. And most parents aren't, rightfully so. So they capitulate. They let him come home. They try another approach. They listen to him this time. Nick learned to work the system early. On the Dopey podcast in 2018, an addiction-focused show where he'd appeared multiple times, he admitted he'd figured out how to navigate rehab without actually committing to recovery. He also admitted he wasn't sober at the time of the interview. He was smoking a little weed, taking a little Adderall. He said the weed was a preventative measure to keep him off harder drugs. And he casually mentioned that about a year and a half earlier, he got back on dope and other things and suffered what he called a cocaine heart attack on a cross-country flight during an intervention. He woke up in a hospital in Boston. But the host asks if he had any parting words for the listeners. Nick said, I have no parting words, just everybody use or don't use, whatever. Sounds like someone really dedicated to his recovery, as everyone around them is, except the addict. And when that happens, you are literally left with no choice other than saying, there's a bridge down the road that might cover you from the rain. That is not a person in recovery. This is a person who has learned that the performance of recovery is enough to keep the money following, the housing secure, and the family engaged. The actual sobriety part to him, optional. The violence wasn't hidden. Nick talked openly about destroying his parents' guest house while high on stimulants. I got totally spun out on uppers. I think I was on coke. And
I mean, Tony has more of a prosecutor vibe, but I wouldn't necessarily say it lacks empathy. I think he has more of like a tough love kind of approach. And I don't think he's completely wrong, though, either. I think it might sound tough to people, but tough is not synonymous with lack of empathy. It can be included, but not always.
Something else, and I was up for days on end, and I started punching out different things in my guest house, like it's his. He said that on Dopey. I think I started with the TV, and then I went over to the lamp, and then just everything in the guest house got wrecked. He described it casually, almost proudly. I went 10 rounds with my guest house. This happened around the time his parents told him he had to leave and go back to rehab. So, in true addict form,
Well, wait 1 second. I gotta say hello to someone real quick. Hold on.
Responded by destroying their property. And then presumably he went to rehab. And then he came back. And the cycle continued. A longtime neighbor of the Reiners told the New York Post after the murders, this is not the first time their son has been violent. I know of another incident a few years back with Nick, but I won't say more than that. I just never thought it would get to this point. An ex-classmate was more blunt. She said she instantly knew Nick was responsible when the deaths were announced as a homicide. A yoga instructor who worked with the family in the early 2000s was so affected by young Nick's screaming outbursts, episodes that could last 20 minutes or longer, that she wrote a children's book about it. The book was about a child with big feelings and even bigger energy who learns to calm down through yoga. It was her way of processing what she'd witnessed in that house. The warning signs weren't subtle. They were screaming. They had been screaming for years. Here's where this gets even more painful. The Reiners weren't naive. They spent years listening to the professionals. They sent Nick to facility after facility, following the advice of counselors and addiction specialists who told them the same thing over and over. Your son is lying to you. He is manipulating you. This is what addicts do. Don't believe the stories. Believe the pattern. And that's true in almost any line of humanity, addict or not. Believe the pattern. When it deviates dramatically, especially even more on a healthy individual, take a look at what's actually going on. Because actions do speak louder than words. And again, if this is speaking to you, don't let this just be a story you're hearing. Let this be information you take in and live by. If you are the caregiver for the addict, take this in as if we're speaking directly to you. I am not a medical professional. You should contact a doctor and do all that. But just take a listen to this, and as a human being, take this to heart. For a while, Rob and Michelle held that line. They enforced boundaries. They insisted on treatment even when Nick resisted. They let him be homeless rather than enable him on his terms. But somewhere along the way, something broke. By 2015, they had completely reversed course. They weren't just questioning the professionals anymore. They were publicly apologizing for ever trusting them. Rob said they should have been listening to our son instead of the people with diplomas on the wall. Michelle said the counselors had convinced them Nick was a liar and a manipulator, and they regretted believing it.
And depending on what version of Nick the professionals were seeing, they could have been absolutely correct. Like if they were talking to the version of Nick that still wanted to use, then yeah, that Nick was probably lying and manipulating and being deceitful. And Rob and Michelle would have been correct to believe the professionals in that case. Now, there are other times when I would say sometimes people do know more than the professionals about themselves, depending on the circumstance. But you have to know that person truly wants what's best for them, for one. And it also depends on the issue sometimes as well. And that's where, if you're Rob or Michelle, you have to use your judgment. Which one is it? To me, they chose poorly. And I think, they had to have known other people that were addicts, whether it's Robert Downey or fill in the blank with any number of celebrities. Most of them would know. They know what an addict using is like. They know that behavior. And you can be a dry drunk. You can be a dry addict, right? So they know that. But somehow, I don't know, Rob and Michelle didn't know that somehow. I don't know. There's something's a little weird with that. You would think he would know.
Successful manipulation by an addict. Check. And the addict knew it, and those around him who loved him and sacrificed everything for him, they could not see the forest before the trees. He had them bamboozled. And I can guarantee if that addict in your life is not actively in treatment and working on their lifelong recovery, you may start saying it that way too. Because what do? When you try this, you try that, you try everything. Well, the doctor route isn't working. The route for rehabs isn't working. What is he saying that might work for him? What does work? An addict who actively is wanting to participate in their own recovery. And that's about it. They have to make that choice. You can't make it for them. You can't force it on them. We have a system, and we talked about this in a video yesterday, where if they don't want the treatment, your options are pretty slim to nil. Yes, you can force 72-hour holds. Yes, you can do these temporary things this way and that way. But unless, as we've learned, unless they are in imminent danger to themselves or others, and the law is pretty clear on that, it's like literally having the weapon in their hand. If they're just hinting at it, if they're violent, if they're demonstrating behavior that could easily escalate to the next level, that's not enough to commit them beyond their will. That gets you a 72-hour hold, maybe. Within the first few hours of being in whatever facility they go to, that facility's like, how quick can we get this person out of here? Maybe within 24 hours you'll get out. You never know. And you know what? They know how to work the shit because they've been in and out of it. In his case, 17 times by his late teens. God knows how many by 32. They know how to successfully manipulate that system. And when they actually get the people who love them the most to believe that true help is the wrong answer, that is how successful manipulation looks when it's complete. The addict doesn't just get the family to doubt the professionals. He gets them to feel guilty for ever having believed anyone but him. He becomes the victim of a system that tried to help him, and the family becomes complicit in that victimization by having participated in it. The only way to make amends, trust him. Give him another chance. This time it'll be different. The Reiners made a movie about it. They went on a press tour together. They told the story Nick wanted told, that the treatment industry had failed him, that his parents had failed him by believing the treatment industry, and that the real path to healing was the family finally seeing things his way, which is the biggest line of bullshit I've ever seen. I'm not blaming Rob for making that movie. If your child is literally dying in front of you, you're going to try every damn thing. And if one of the levers on your repertoire of things you can do is make a movie when you pull it, then you're going to take that lever. Well, maybe this creative process, maybe we could bond together. I get the thought process. And if Nick had actively wanted to be in recovery and work on his sobriety and that movie together, it could have ended in a very beautiful way. But it didn't, because he didn't want to. And here we are. Being Charlie answered the reconciliation. The father and son came together. The system is blamed. The family is magically healed and everything is great. But that's not real life. In real life, there is no reconciliation. There was just a guest house on a property and a son who never really left and parents who couldn't bring themselves to make him. I want to be clear about something here again. Rob and Michelle Reiner were not stupid. They were not weak. They were not bad parents. They were parents in an impossible situation, facing a problem that has no reliable solution. They had resources most families can only dream of: money, connections, access to the best treatment programs in the country, and none of it worked because there is no amount of money that can force an adult to get sober. There is no treatment program that succeeds on someone who doesn't want it to succeed. There is no love powerful enough to override another person's autonomy, even when that autonomy is being used to destroy them.
And that's a great point. And that's true for personality disorders. It's true for many things. Addictions, loving them is not enough to overcome it. Now, some would say, well, loving yourself is enough to overcome it. But again, that really all depends. You better be putting in the footwork of what real love looks like towards yourself. And it's something I think a lot of people mess up. There's the other thing I was going to say. Character. Character is a part of mental health and addiction treatment that I don't think gets talked about enough. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you can have a mental health issue and you can be an asshole. Both of those things can be true. Doesn't mean everyone with a mental health condition is an asshole. No, that's not what it means. But there are some people that have bad character, and that part needs to be addressed. That's one of the things that a 12-step program addresses, that directly addresses bad character, because it tells you to be less self-centered, more honest, have more humility, and try to help others, and to show gratitude, and to give back what you've received. Those are the antidotes to bad character. That needs to be a part of treatment. If you neglect that, you can do all of the right med routines, you can hit the gym, do all sorts of things, but you can still be a jerk. You can still be a jerk. And I think it just doesn't get talked about enough. Dr. George Simon, he talks about this all the time in his book, Character Disturbance, in his book, In Sheep's Clothing, and then his most recent book, 10 Essentials of Character. I should really have him back on the show to talk about that. But it's important. It's one of the most important things of this age.
I'd rather have you alive and hating me than dead in the streets, the Rob Reiner character says in Being Charlie. That line came from real life. That was the philosophy the Reiners lived by for a time. Keep him close, keep him alive, even if he hates you for it, even if it costs you everything. A family friend told reporters after the murders they did everything for Nick, every treatment program, therapy sessions, and put aside their lives to save Nick's repeatedly. I've never known a family so dedicated to a child. To have it end this way is awful. According to law enforcement sources, the Reiners were finally pursuing a conservatorship over Nick at the time of their deaths. After nearly 2 decades of trying everything else, they had started the process of legally taking control of his life. And guess what? The system makes that next to impossible, too. Michelle had reportedly become increasingly concerned about his mental health in recent weeks. Something had shifted. They were finally taking the kind of drastic action the situation had demanded for years. They ran out of time. The night before the murders, Rob and Michelle attended that Christmas party at Conan O'Brien's house. And believe me, I didn't have Conan O'Brien Christmas party on my murder Christmas card of the year or my murder bingo sheet of events that were going to take place at all, where somehow Conan O'Brien's name comes up in a true crime story about his Christmas party. But here we are. They allegedly asked the host if they could bring Nick. According to sources who spoke to Rolling Stone, the reason was simple. They wanted to keep an eye on him. Think about that for a moment. A holiday party with friends, black ties, a wonderful gala, and the primary concern is monitoring your 32-year-old son's behavior, making sure he doesn't do something that embarrasses the family or worse. And it didn't work. Multiple witnesses reported that Nick displayed antisocial behavior at the party. He was seen wandering alone, looking flat and emotionless. A loud argument broke out between Nick and his father. The family left shortly after. An embarrassment. Sometime in the early morning hours of December 14th, according to prosecutors, Nick Reiner allegedly stabbed both his parents to death inside their home. Their daughter, Romy, found the bodies Sunday afternoon. Nick was taken into custody later near USC. He did not resist. As you know, he's now facing 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, the use of a deadly weapon. The charges carry a maximum sentence of life without parole or the death penalty. Prosecutors haven't decided yet which they'll seek. Nick's defense attorney, Alan Jackson, who successfully defended Karen Reed in another high-profile case, has indicated that mental health will likely be central to the defense. Nick wasn't medically cleared to appear at his initial arraignment, though the reason for that has not officially been disclosed. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do with an addict acting out in the way Nick was is walk away. Not because you don't care, not because you've given up, but because staying has become the thing that's killing both of you. Because your presence, your resources, your home, your hope, your sanity, all of it has become fuel for their destruction and yours. When we're giving all of ourselves to someone that only takes and is incapable of not only receiving, also giving back. When we give and give and give and give, guess who wins and guess who loses here? It ain't the person that's giving all of themselves. And the addict, the word there is incapable. Incapable of receiving. Some just are. And that's a hard reality nobody wants to wrestle with. And I cannot imagine wrestling with that if it was my own kid. That is the hard reality, though, that some parents are forced to face, even when they've done everything right and their hearts are in the right place. When someone destroys your property while high and frames it as your fault for setting boundaries, that's a message. When someone has a documented history of volatility that neighbors and childhood acquaintances immediately recognize as a precursor to violence, that's a pattern. When professionals tell you this person is manipulating you and you respond by publicly apologizing for ever believing them, the manipulation has already won. There is a point where love becomes the weapon, and they use it against you, where every attempt to help becomes another opportunity for them to exploit your guilt, your hope, your refusal to give up, where the guest house in the backyard isn't a path to recovery. It's just proximity to the next crisis. They had a guest house. Most of us don't have a guest house. For many of us, this is happening in the bedroom across the hall, in the basement, and the extra couch in the living room, making it even more dangerous. Rob and Michelle Reiner loved their son. That is not in question. They loved him enough to make a movie about his struggles, to sit next to him on press tours, to keep him close, even when they had every...
So people were saying in the chat that they think this guy is spreading incorrect information. So let me know what you think he thinks, or what you think he is saying that is incorrect, and I'll go over it.
Every instinct and every professional telling them to create distance. They loved him enough to spend nearly 20 years trying to save him. And in the end, that love may have been the thing that kept them in range. There's a line in Being Charlie that reads differently now, the son character, explaining why he used drugs. He says, "It was never about the drugs. It was, all I ever wanted was a way to kill the noise. But the more I used, the louder it got. The noise never stopped. Not through 17 trips to rehab, not through the movie they made together, not through the years of living in the guest house, just steps away from parents who refused to give up on him. The noise just kept getting louder until it drowned out everything, including, allegedly, the lives of the two people who had sacrificed the most to keep it quiet. This isn't a story with a moral that fits on a bumper sticker. It's not a story that tells you what to do if someone you love is in active addiction. Every situation is different. Every family has to find their own limits. But it is a story that says this: limits exist for a reason. Boundaries aren't abandonment. And sometimes the person who loves you the most is the person most vulnerable to the damage you can do. Rob and Michelle Reiner asked if they could bring Nick to a Christmas party so they could keep an eye on him. They were still watching, still hoping, and still trying. They were also, according to sources, finally pursuing the legal mechanism that might have forced real change, a conservatorship that would have taken decision-making power out of Nick's hands. Again, something nearly impossible to attain in many states. Does it exist? Yes. The way to get there, the path, the boxes you need to check that the court needs to also agree with, even if you have all the evidence, it ain't easy. We will never know if it would have worked. We only know that they didn't get the chance to find out. Sometimes letting go is the only way to survive, and sometimes even when you finally start to let go, it's already too late. Give me your thoughts in the comment section on YouTube. If you're not already there, search Hidden Killers with Tony Bruschi. I would love to see what you guys have to say about all this. If this has reached you, if this has touched a nerve, and you would like to share your story, I would highly suggest doing it in our comment section, because I can guarantee there's going to be a lot of people out there just like you reading and watching this. And that sense of community, that I'm not alone, other people are going through this. While it seems like you are completely by yourself on that journey, you are not. This is just something a lot of people do not talk about a lot because it's traumatic. It's horrible. You don't want to relive the worst moments of your life over and over again.
And you see, and that's why we talk about this, because it's not even about the Reiners now, Rob and Nick and Michelle, or even their siblings. It's more about, I think, just talking about the issues in general. Mental health issues, personality disorders, developmental issues, neurodevelopmental issues, addiction issues. This is the opportunity to talk about them all. And again, it gets so complicated because so many things can be overlapping in one. But I do agree with most of what Tony Bruschi says there. I think I lean more in his direction than I would in other people's direction. I think he's a little more on the tough love route. And I think for the character and addiction stuff, that is what's needed. Now, for purely a mental health thing, maybe a little more understanding and compassion in that case. But it just depends. I mean, you'd have to tell me and show me a situation, and then maybe I would say something different. That's why it's so difficult to talk about these things generally, because if I were to hear about each individual person's situation, maybe I would say a completely different thing. I don't know. It just really depends. You have to unravel things. Sometimes unraveling things is some people need meds first before they can even think about stopping using. Sometimes. That's kind of what medically assisted treatment's for, whether it's Suboxone, Subutex, or methadone for people that are on opiates. But those things can be unsafe too, you better believe it. I mean, methadone and Suboxone, they're harder to get off of than the actual drugs you're doing. That can be super difficult to get off of. How do you explain brain damage to a patient? What kind of brain damage? Yes, I concur with you, Jared. I like this guy. I follow him. Yeah, I mean, I think he's good. I think he's good. Some people don't like him, but that's okay. Happy New Year, beautiful waterfall. I always feel like I'm like talking to my girlfriend or something. Like, oh, hello, beautiful. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be no cookie cutter approaches here. Each situation needs to be taken a little bit differently. I will say, when there's addiction issues involved, I've seen a lot of people improve because of 12-step programs. 12-step programs don't address mental health, but what I do think they do is they get people a stable enough baseline to go on the path to helping their mental health. I've seen that countless times. And some of the hardest ones, something like an undiagnosed autism. So back in the day, for me, people used to think I was using when I wasn't. I was sober, but since I had such severe anxiety from being on the spectrum, people used to think I was a druggie, even before I really was. So I had my baseline level of consciousness just wasn't good. And when my baseline level of consciousness wasn't good, all I wanted to do was get out of my skin because I was so uncomfortable in my own skin. That's where opiates and booze in particular, they really hit the spot for me. But that's one of the clues as well. If your baseline is just not good, that could be an autistic thing. Or maybe that could be some kind of personality disorder. Maybe there's anxiety, depression. I would say most addicts, though, will have at least some level of anxiety and depression for sure. It's cool saying beautiful too, but I get you. I'll call you waterfall. Don't go chasing waterfalls. Happy New Year, Melissa. And everyone in the chat, listen to you every night. You took the night off last night, and I was disappointed. Did I take the night off last night? I don't think I did. We were here, Melissa. I was here. We were here from like 10 to a little over midnight. YouTube, I can't believe they spent not much money with no diagnosis. That's wild. It's interesting, right? Thank you, Eval. Or what's the correct pronunciation? Considering I have back east blood, Silver Springs, Maryland. Happy New Year, Jared. Great job. Thank you. Thank you very much for the super chat and all of your support. You're not very far from me because I'm in NJ. So probably like 2 hours or a little more. No, we were here. Yes, we were here. Beautiful Waterfall knows we were here. We were here last night. We were just asked what you thought. We weren't talking about Nick Reiner. That's what it was. We were talking about Erica Kirk last night. Talking about a different topic. Of course, Kate. And Happy New Year to you too, and Eva. Okay, that's even better. So I can remember that. Thank you again, Eva. And, well, here's the other thing. At some point, we're going to run out of Nick Reiner content. That's going to happen at a point, especially if there's no trial. So I'll have to find other things to talk about as well. I mean, often I've talked about narcissism and I interview people about it. But here's the thing about that. I've been talking about that for years. It can get stale. It gets stale after a while. I kind of like lose my momentum with it. That's why I kind of like applying my knowledge to these current events cases. It keeps me interested. I can go over other videos and I can have you all in the chat, which I think is great. Phil Bradley, you are neither late nor early. You are just on time. Kat does love her Fleetwood Mac. Now, we can go over some Tyler Robinson stuff, I think. I mean, a lot of people think he's a patsy. But it's hard to say, like there's a fog. There's a fog of the trial going on right now. Thank you very much for this, Melissa. You are the best. So sweet of you. Happy New Year to you, Melissa. Thank you so much. Oh. Israel Keys? No, we're not going over that. Yeah, I did go over the football one the other day. That one was pretty weird. It just seemed like the guy was drinking and on cocaine, and then he just kind of lost it. And he had been abusive to his woman before. It's kind of like a coercive control domestic violence case. Maybe he was a narcissist, and then he just lost it. I don't know why he'd be so stupid like that. But you know what? Her daughter, the daughter of the person he killed, she's super lucky to be alive. The bullet hit her here and didn't go through. It went up, which is insane. But I feel bad for her now. I mean, she lost her mother. The dude's gone too. She's probably glad he's gone, but still. It's terrible. Shall you fool someone people manipulate? He had disdain for fame because he hates the fakeness. He wants to be truly seen and heard. As as a child, he became distorted, obviously. Yeah, I could see that, Taylor. I mean, the reason I had thought about undiagnosed autism for Nick before was I got some of that vibe, the awkwardness, the gravitating to drugs. People who are undiagnosed on the spectrum, they might do that. Now, just because someone's on the spectrum, though, doesn't mean they're going to be violent. But here's the other thing. There are some people on the spectrum who are violent. Because just because you're on the spectrum, it doesn't mean you might not be comorbid with something else. You can be comorbid with other things. Just like with schizophrenia. Most schizophrenics are not violent. That being said, some of them can be. YouTubeville, thank you so much for this. Happy New Year to you as well. I'm glad you're enjoying the chat here. Let him go. Patch Lindley. Vocation. Well, all right. Who's vocation? The guy who did the football killings? I don't know. I don't know what his vocation was, to be honest. I don't know. Well, if you really want to tackle current events and apply psych to this, could be controversial. But how about the psychopathology of our U.S. president? Well, Turtle, I got you covered. Because Dr. Keith Campbell and we went over that very subject. And granted, in that interview, I was a little bit tired. No, that's not an excuse. But when I'm tired, like clearly I'm more of a vampire. But that interview for me was at 9 a.m. in the morning. I'm not sharp at 9 a.m. in the morning. But I think you'd find that interview interesting. Now, well, I'll give you a little TLDR. The TLDR is Dr. Keith Campbell thinks Trump doesn't meet the impairment necessary to be diagnosed with NPD. Because in order to have impairment, usually it impacts your relationships or your career. And he thinks, oh, he's president, so that doesn't meet the qualification. I don't necessarily agree, but that's what he was saying. And so it's one of the reasons why I don't like the diagnosis in the DSM. You have to have impairment in your life. My problem with impairment is it's not always easy to see, for one. For two, a lot of times you're impairing other people's lives, which is they're the ones struggling because of you. So I just don't know. No, narcissists absolutely can be successful. But in order to be diagnosed with NPD, there has to be an impairment. So it depends on what your definition of impairment is. One definition is impairment in your relationships. Another is impairment in your career. But I think even if you don't have impairment in those areas, like, because if you're in an abusive relationship, you might not be able to know. Like someone can be in an abusive relationship for 20 years it doesn't look like impairment from the outside, is what I'm saying. And what were you disagreeing about, Ann? And disagreements are always welcome here, provided, of course, people don't get too antagonistic about their disagreements. Harder to diagnose it with a few visits as well. And that's one of the problems with psychology and psychiatry in general. Which part about it, though, Ann? So people do an intake at a psychiatrist. An intake's like 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. And then sometimes you get a diagnosis from 2 to 3 hours. And then they diagnose your entire life and prescribed you sometimes heavy duty meds. I don't know. It just seems like not enough time to truly make an informed decision. Okay, good. Good. So we'll be coming up now on the Central Time. Happy New Year's, which will be good. All right, he was not a loner, left wing, anything. You talk about Tyler Robinson. So I don't know, but Tyler Robinson, I don't know if he's been thrown under the bus here or if he really did it. Like, I really don't know. There's so much crap being thrown against the wall now. I know the official narrative has a lot of holes. That's what I will say. The official narrative has a lot of holes, and I don't trust the FBI. The very same FBI that would say, we're not going to release the videos of Epstein Island because we want to protect the victims. Meanwhile, it's the victims themselves that want the perpetrators put to justice. So it's BS. It's BS. He might be Chick. I just don't know enough about him yet. I don't know as much about Tyler. Much of the discussions about the case I hear involve other things, not Tyler. What you hear is, oh, he's a patsy. He's the one taking the fall. But you hear about Turning Point. You hear about Erica Kirk. You hear about Israel. You hear about what else? All of the other higher ups at Turning Point. He very well could Wednesday. That would disappoint a lot of people, though. Yeah, that would disappoint a lot of people. Oh, Kat. Thank you so much, Kat. I appreciate you. Thank you for all you do. Have some British pounds. Oh, I'd love me some pounds. I love me some pounds. Thank you again. Everyone should check out Kat's channel too. She does some singing on there. That is, of course, if you want people to see it. I assume you do, Kat, because you posted it. So everyone should check out her channel. She's got a great voice. Mac and cheese, I do believe it is probably all a psyop. I think all the things that we know, because here's the thing, like sports and music used to be kind of the bread and circuses, but now I think bread and circuses have morphed into political theater too. So there's political theater that is really a bread and circus. So even the entire Charlie Kirk thing, part of it could be almost a bread and circus to me, because it's not, if it diverts the attention away from other things. Not as much talk about the economy, not as much talk about Venezuela, not as much talk about this other war, not as much talk about Trump getting the Israel award with Netanyahu the other day. There's all sorts of things that distracts from. Sources say Nick got romantic pregnant when she was 18 and Rob kept it under wraps. Who? Nick got who? His girlfriend pregnant? They call it all Bismarck mac and cheese. That's when there's a guy named James Burke. He did a show once with Dan Carlin. Dan Carlin's one of my favorite people. He has a podcast called Hardcore History. And he also did a podcast called Common Sense. And one of the episodes, he talks to James Burke, and they talk about this. It's all Bismarck philosophy, which is basically, we don't really know what's going on. What we think is going on is not really what's going on. And I think there's some truth in that. I do think so too, Crazy. I think the bread and circuses have morphed into the political world. And so anything you see on YouTube and X, most of it is just a bread and circus now. Most. And it keeps the economy spinning though. There's a fair amount of people that are YouTube creators like me. There's a fair amount of people that are having podcasts, creating content on X. This channel is really interesting. You might like it to cover cult. You know what? The Full House show, I did read his book, or I got his book, the Cult of Trump book. I did get that book. And I have invited him on the show, but it was a while ago now, and he didn't reply to me. But I'll try to talk to him. He might piss some people off, though. But again, I'm willing to speak to anybody. Some people would be upset, no doubt, though. Like, I would speak to him. I would speak to the person who writes the Cult of Trump book. And I would also speak to Nick Fuentes. I wouldn't care. I would talk to any of them. That's the difference between me and anyone else. I'll talk to everybody. LA County, as some black men took a wrong turn in for double homicide. Oh boy, not too good. What do you all think about this AI stuff popping around too? Happy New Year to you, Wyndham. The AI stuff is getting out of hand on Facebook and Instagram. To a lesser extent, YouTube, but it's really out of hand right now. It's getting hard to tell and to distinguish reality. Ellie says, thank you, Black Sheep, for blessing this channel that Jared is working diligently to produce. Very interesting commentators, too, in the lives. I appreciate you, Ellie. You're one of the OGs here, too. Speaking of the OGs, where is Jolly? Where's Jolly and George? I would agree, Kate. I am not a fan. It's especially on Instagram. It throws it in your face. And there's even like AI OnlyFans girls on Instagram that it tries to throw in my face. It's like, I don't want to see this. I purposefully go out of my way to not follow them because I don't want bikini clad OnlyFans girls on my feed. But they just say, nope, we want you to have it anyway. So Meta's got to get their acts together, honestly. They got to get their acts together. What about the Idaho 4? The Kohbergers? The Kohberger case? You know, he made it anticlimactic, though, because he admitted to it, right? He admitted to it to avoid the death penalty, I guess. AI is going to create more lies and more work to see what is true, create more rumors. It's going to get scary. It's going to get scary because AI is going to take jobs. It's going to take jobs. It'll start with the driving jobs. The second that they can prove that an AI driver is safer than a human driver, the insurance rates for a human driver will skyrocket, and then no employer will be able to hire humans anymore. That'll be that. And then the real big thing will be when you can start sleeping with robots. That will really be the end. When you can sleep with robots, oh God, we're done for. I mean, marriages and relationships right now already, just with social media, are a struggle. Let alone when they start creating these robots that you can sleep with. Now, the first barrier will be the cost. So when it happens, it'll be like freaking, they'll probably make it like $10,000. So a lot of people just wouldn't even be able to do it. But then, God forbid, if they ever get affordable, oh Lord. Why? You're absolutely correct. It's racing towards us faster than I think faster than most people really know. Not quite yet, crazy. It's coming. Excuse the pun. It's coming, but not yet. They can't wait to replace women with robot girlfriends. There is a fair amount of that, the Full House. There is certainly. A lot of the MGTOW folks, they are counting down the days. The the MGTOW slash incel folks, they are counting down the days until that happens, which is unfortunate. It's unfortunate because a lot of them, they get rejected because they're unattractive, they're awkward, and then they have a bad attitude, and things compound for them in a bad direction. Cleaning would be nice. Just wait until the robots replicate. That's the end game here, right? When we lose control of the robots, and we've already seen that a little bit, by the way. They've had to disconnect these robots that were able to communicate with one another and preserve themselves. I think it was Meta doing something with that, but it was not too good. It was not good. All right, the feeling is mutual. Danielle from hell. I'm glad all the black sheeps get along for the very most part. But it's good. We got a positive chat here. Not too much riffraff. The riffraff stays away. I get you. So you all have to tell me two things. People you would like me to interview moving forward, and then any other videos / topics you would like to see me go over, because like I said, Nick Reiner topic is going to run out at some point. Welcome, Sarah. You are new, but I recognize your name from several times being here. ChatGPT does have some work to do, Anne. Absolutely. Remember the Tom Selleck movie, was it Runaway? Major League? We welcome black sheep to the flock with open arms. With open arms, we do. Yeah, but any other cases, whether it's a Koberger case, a more Charlie Kirk case, or what else is even out there? The football case. There's always new things coming around. That's the thing. There's always crimes being committed. There's always big stuff going on. The other big case was this woman. Her name's Claire. In Canada, she's an actress. She's suing Canada because she wants to be able to end her own life. And right now in Canada, that is not possible for mental health reasons. She's got severe depression, and she says, I've been to many doctors, tried dozens of medications, and nothing has worked, so I want to be able to end my own life. But you're not allowed to do that right now, so she's suing Canada to be able to do that. And the doctors are split. One doctor says, I'm totally against it when it's for mental health because I've seen people get better down the line. And I would agree with that doctor. I think it's true. When you have a mental health issue, sometimes there are solutions that you don't even know exist yet. There are things that can happen that could really change everything. You're just not aware of them. And so it makes you think there's no hope. Now, other doctors are saying, nope, I fully support her. She wants to end her own life. Fine. She can end her life. What is this Israel Keys case? I don't know what that is. Oh, Luigi. Oh. Clearly, she's not mentally competent to make the decision. I tend to lean that way, chick. Australia is talking about it. I think it comes down to saving money on healthcare. Interesting. I don't know, Wednesday. What is this Israel Keys case? People have been talking about that. What is that? Canada does. Canada does have it, but mental health is not covered yet. So you can't do it because of depression right now. You can do it because of other reasons, Alzheimer's or other kinds of crippling, like stage 4 cancer stuff, but not for depression yet. Not for depression. I don't know. I have a hard time getting behind someone giving up like that when it's mental health. I totally get it. I totally get the desire, but I don't know. But all right, everybody. I think it's about time to wrap it up here. Almost going on 4 hours now. Serial killer who's similar to Ted Bundy. Okay. That'll be interesting to go over then. Guys, do some homework for you all. Oh, it is? Okay. Why is it coming back into the news? Antarctica, huh? Interesting. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. I appreciate all of your comments in the chat too. You know, some good stuff there. Yeah, Turtle. That's what the Canada case was. Yes, indeed. If you're still here, remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Thankfully, the YouTube algorithm's actually been friendly to these live streams recently, which is good. Pops them up. So you type in this, boom, here you are. Thank you, Jared and chat. Happy New Year to everyone. Yes, you know it, the Tonight Show. There you go. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, YouTube. Thank you, Danielle, of course, and Kat and everyone else. Ellie, you got it, Melissa. Thanks for being here. Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate you. You've shared some good stuff tonight, too. The chat appreciates it. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the blaming meds for murder. That's probably not going to go too well. Got to get my last Z's of 2025. I found the new chat home. Or got 1 hour left. Okay, yeah, you do. Because Arizona is weird, right? They change their time zone throughout the year. Sometimes it's 1 hour behind East Coast time. Sometimes it's 2. Or is it sometimes 2 versus sometimes 3? I can't remember. Megan Kelly. Megan Kelly. What do you know? All right. Happy New Year's to you too, Zelda. Happy New Year's to you all. I love you all. We got a great flock of black sheep here. We got some cool stuff coming up here in 2026. Yes, we do. All right, everybody. Over and out.